Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Enlightening Tangent podcast. I'm Gautam, aka the Seeker of Wisdom, your host. So, it's been a hot minute since I made a podcast episode, much less with a guest. And normally, when I pick out guests for my podcast, I don't really have a specific criteria per se. Some of my guests are subject matter experts in their respective fields, others are manifestation or mindset coaches like myself. And there are also folks who are just passionate about the things that they do in life. It doesn't necessarily have to be one specific thing per se, rather, it is a multitude of things, if you will. And because of that, these group of people, in my opinion at least, are also the individuals who gather the most number of stories due to their far reaching interests in many different areas. And that is very interesting because as humans, we are all storytellers in our own respect, in our own regard. But folks who have multiple different interests, who also passionately spend time in each of those interests regularly, gather the most number of interesting stories. And it was for that specific reason I reached out to our guest today, because when I saw her Instagram profile, it wrote in uppercase letters, dubbed Conspiracy Bay. And right off the bat, I knew I had to invite her to the show because I knew that she has a wealth of stories to share. But, anyways, she is a freelance photographer based in Kansas City, Missouri, and she's completely into anything strange and unusual. Alex Shae, everyone.
Yeah, I think what I wanted to start with questions wise was if you could, go back to a point in life and think, okay, this is where it's all started, my journey wise, my conspiracy journey, or just my spiritual journey as a whole. Do you remember a point in your life where you can say, like, okay, that's where it all began for me?
Yes, I do. I feel like as a kid growing up, I had some pretty cool grandparents who lived in a historical home in
Mhm.
Excelsior Springs, and they were collectors of antiques, and they collected many things, many things. And I was always drawn to the Halloween stuff that I
Mhm.
feel like they loved collecting that. My grandpa also collected really cool things like Civil War artifacts.
Wow.
Um, one of the other things that they collected were like authentic Raggedy Ann dolls. That was a big thing that my grandma, which people call them Annabelle now, but the original
Right.
Annabelle is actually a Raggedy Ann doll that has red hair and black eyes, button eyes, and those were really creepy. And
Right.
I just feel like I've always had a connection um, to things that people had connections with in their physical life. So they collected a lot of things that were either through traumatic experiences with people or things that meant a lot of things to people. Like another thing my grandma collected was authentic slave dolls that these people or the children would make. And you could just tell that those were dolls that probably meant a lot to them and that were
Right.
very special to them. So those type of things, I think, helped shape me, kind of like how we were talking earlier about the
Right.
typewriters. We would go to
Yeah.
auctions all the time, like auctions or estate sales, anything like that.
Hmm.
And I would always want to buy all the typewriters or the cash registers. That was like a big thing. Like my grandpa, he would always know the people that would be doing the auctions, and
Hmm.
he would laugh because the auctioneer guy would know that because I was young that I would instantly put my card up to buy whatever it was that I wanted for the highest amount. He would always go for a high amount and laugh, and he wouldn't charge my grandpa um what he did, but he would always laugh because he knew the second that one of the typewriters would come up that I was going to throw my card up to buy that typewriter because I
Yeah.
was going to collect every one that I could. So Um, I feel like they really helped shape that. And my grandma also told me a lot of stories about her mom's experience with the paranormal and my connection that I have with her. I know I shared with you that she passed away 2 weeks after I was born, but
Right.
I feel like I have a very strong connection with her, one that I didn't realize until I was actually older. But she has a really strong connection with birds. And I didn't know how
Mhm.
strong of a connection that was, and that she was actually a really big part of the bird watching community for like a bird association that actually
Right.
tracked birds in America, which is really neat because I didn't realize how big of a part of tracking birds that she was a part of. So, yeah, I feel like my grandparents were a big part of that. And then it just kind of, my mom helped support my weirdness with loving Halloween. So every Halloween, I was something amazing like Bride of Frankenstein or a witch, like the Wicked Witch from the West and
Right.
the Wizard of Oz. So
Yeah.
she always supported my weirdness, and I always loved aliens and
Mhm.
anything that was different, Sasquatch. So I feel like I was able to kind of be my weird self kind of my whole life. And I had people who also loved collecting weird things. So that was a big part of it.
Right. Yeah, I have so many questions, but I guess like the one I wanted to start with was typewriters. Like, do you still have your collection? Like, what happened to the
I
collection
would
right
love
now?
to talk about that. Yes. So, my grandpa and I were talking on the phone actually the other day, and he said he was in the attic at their house.
Mhm.
He still lives there. And he was telling me that he was in the attic and that he had ran across this tricycle that I used to ride when I was like 3. And it was like my
Right.
favorite thing ever. And he said, I saw your tricycle up in the attic. Do you want that? And I was thinking in my head, oh my gosh, there's probably all those typewriters up there. So I think my grandpa actually still has them. And it would be really cool to see if I could get a couple of those actually. And if I get one, I don't know how much it would cost to mail one to you, but I would love to share my typewriters with you.
Oh, that would be great. I will pay whatever it takes to get one for sure.
Right. We'll pay the shipping because we don't have to pay for it, the antique
Right.
part, but we'll pay for the shipping.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think that's so kind of you. Firstly, thank you. But yeah, I get excited when I hear about typewriters and stuff. And like, have you watched Loki from Marvel by any chance recently?
You know what? I
Yeah.
saw the commercial. I don't know if it's for the upcoming movie or show, but
Right.
I know a little bit about that universe and him, but I
Mhm.
haven't actually got to fully experience that.
Okay.
And I would love to, but if you could tell me a little bit about it, I would love
Yeah,
that.
like I wouldn't spoil the entire thing because I know you would love it. But long story short, he gets pulled into this organization called the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, and they kind of exist out of the linear time space, basically. So they kind of police different timelines, etc. And they have a 70s aesthetic to them. So
Ooh. Okay,
yeah,
that's cool.
yeah, of all the things they could have done, they have a 70s aesthetic and they use typewriters for documenting everything. Yeah.
That's perfect. I love
Yeah,
that.
I know that's why I was like I brought that up because I knew you would like really love that example. So everything in that world is it's like those old 80s computers with like green screens and like those binary words and those kinds of aesthetic. It's so crazy. It's really nice. I really like that vibe. It's like basically the 70s. So typewriters just fit right into that world. And yeah, that's like it just reignited my love for it. I remember when I first fell in love with a typewriter was when I watched Breakfast at Tiffany's. And like before the song begins, the guy is like typing in this like big red typewriter, and I'm like, that's the greatest thing that mankind has ever produced.
We
Uh,
both talked about how much we love vintage stuff, and that
yeah,
is a
uh,
timeless thing to think that people, you know, would write books and type for so long on those, and now
yeah.
we have this technology that allows you to talk into something and it types it for you. So, very different times.
It's different, but at the same time, like that. there's a charm to those, pieces of technology that I don't think you can replicate it with the current technologies.
I agree.
Yeah. And it's not even like a purist kind of thing, like, some people will be like, oh, digital versus analog and those types of stuff, but there's just something with the way old school tech was. There was just so much care to it. I was really deep diving into typewriters at one point, and I didn't know this, but like in some typewriters you can actually like undo words. Like there are mechanisms that like erases letters
Erase
away.
it?
Yeah,
What?
yeah,
Okay, that's cool.
yeah. That exactly. Yeah. So I was like, for them to think so far ahead at that time and age to incorporate all of that, it's just like, I feel like just the era itself, those people like really cared about the product that they were putting out there. Most people
Yes.
forget that the first ever cars were electric. They weren't gasoline or diesel power. They were actually electric cars. Like those were the first ones to exist, on a commercial level. And like people really cared about the stuff that they were putting out, and they lasted as well, compared to, right now. It's like, it's a miracle if you have anything last for a decade at this point. Whereas back in
Yes,
the day,
the
yeah,
craftsmanship I feel like has, yes, is very different.
yeah. And that's why I really like those things. And yeah, and you don't have to, diving into the conspiracy realm, I guess, worry about like somebody just like monitoring what you're typing, I guess. So there's that aspect to it. It's just
I
between
did
me
not
and,
even
yeah,
think about that like that, and I
yeah,
love that. That's a very interesting. Yes, this is a very more private time, I guess. That
yeah,
sounds,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Like I can honestly, imagine Batman having one like very easily.
Oh
Just because
yeah.
he doesn't want to be tracked or something, because yeah, like nobody's going to be listening to it unless like you have the hard copy itself. You can't really have anything against, anyone. So you can journal, you can, if you are lazy to write, or if your arms just tire out, typewriter is the way to go, I guess. It's like the best of both worlds, I would say.
You want to know one of my favorite typewriter scenes in any type of
Yeah.
entertainment
Yes.
would definitely be in The Shining when he's typing. I don't know if you've seen that before, but
I've heard of
he's
it, but I've not seen it.
it's about a man and his wife and their son, and they go to stay at a hotel, and it's basically during the winter time, and
Right.
they get snowed in and they have to stay there and take care of it. Nobody else is staying there but them. They're kind of like taking care of it for the winter. And he's supposed to be writing this book. And his wife thinks all this time that he's spending writing this book, he's, writing it. But in reality, he keeps typing the same thing over and over. And I'm pretty sure it says something to the effect of, no work and all play makes Jack a dull boy. And that's all he's typing this whole time, and he's not been typing his
Wow.
book that he's supposed to be working on. But it's a very, in that scene when she kind of realizes that he's going crazy, um it's a very, very
Is it a horror movie?
amazing scene. What's that?
Is it a horror movie?
Yes, it is actually.
Okay.
Yes, it's
Okay.
by Stephen King. He's a horror
Oh yeah,
author,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
he's
I think he
amazing.
wrote he wrote it as well. I think the movie.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah.
correct. And
Yeah.
Carrie, he's got a lot out there.
Right. Yeah. Like he comes with pretty wacky ideas. I feel just the concept of that it movie, that the clown scares the heck out of me. Yeah. Like
A
it's like,
really interesting story about him.
yeah.
I think that's another reason. I feel like my mom said this the other day. She said, I think I was a part of your weirdness." And I said, "Yeah, you definitely supported it." And then she would always read books when she would have like her own like adult time, and that was like her favorite thing to do. And I remember one time when I was in the kitchen at our house, we had these cabinets, and there was these teapots, like these old teapots that she had that you could see on the display at the top of the cabinets. And I remember thinking, how are those teapots like up so high, and how is she displaying those? And I was curious. So I
Right.
climbed up on the counter and I'm looking, and she has 3 Stephen King books each stacked underneath every single one of these teapots. And so every day after school, I would come home take a teapot off and look
Right.
and read these Stephen King books, and the covers were so enticing, of just interesting, of what is this book about. And that was like another big part of me diving into the strange and unusual, I guess, through Stephen King's mind.
Yeah, and I think like exploration, like in your maybe childhood and like teenage years, was much more fulfilling and was much more adventurous, I feel, than it is right now these days. Just
Yes.
find like how you just mentioned that there's a whole story to you just finding Stephen King's books, for example. Like these days it's more like, oh, I bumped into it on a post, or I read about it on Pinterest. Sure, it leads us to things and it's great, but there's not a lot of story, behind it. I
I
feel
will
like
say
this generation was robbed of it. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly what I was just about to say. I feel like there's not as much curiosity or questions being asked by
Yeah.
the younger generations because of a certain expectation of how you should be as a citizen. I feel like I've always stood out. I'm left-handed, and so I've always been, I feel like, a different type of person, because
Right.
everyone looks at you differently when they're like, "Oh, you're left-handed." And it's like, I don't look at you and go, "Oh, you're right-handed." But I've always stood out, and I've always been different, and I've always spoke about things that other people didn't. So, yeah, I feel like my life experiences are definitely not the same as other people. And maybe that's why, I have the life that I do, or why I seem interesting to people sometimes, because I can be almost like a show, in a way, of a circus show, but people love talking to me about the strange and weird. And I know I don't judge people. I like hearing everybody's thoughts, because I don't feel like anyone knows the whole truth. People may know things that they're not telling people, but I feel like anyone who has some research or some type of theory, there's a lot of things that we believe in now, like such as gravity, that was once a theory, that people believe in, because
Right.
someone said that's what it is. But you just have to always keep being curious and asking questions. And that's what I want to inspire for even the younger generation. I have a lot of people that have been recently following me on Instagram, and it'll tell you on your insight, like, the demographic of people, who is
Yeah.
it, more male, is it
Yeah.
more female, what age range and stuff. And I just don't, people can get sucked into just being on scrolling, a zombie scroll, and just watching endless videos that just don't seem to grab anybody's attention. So you just keep scrolling. I hope that the things that I talk about or post, even though, sometimes I want to make people laugh, but other times I'm also being, serious, because, awareness is something that I think everyone should have. And I feel like everyone has been so, just like kind of, I don't even know how to describe it, but I just feel like everyone's been kind of like censored down to where no one wants to step out of line to ask or be curious. And I think that people shouldn't lose that.
Yeah, like I definitely agree with you on that, because I feel as time goes by, there are these companies and corporations that have so much control. I wouldn't call it power, but they have so much control over how we interact with like the world and information as a whole. And that there's a whole generation that is being influenced by that. Like it's crazy for the current generation, myself included, to think at one point people delivered pizzas without having GPS.
Yeah, that's hard for
Yeah.
some kids to comprehend.
Yeah, and I was like, how on earth, like, sure, they use street signs, I guess, and maps, sure, but it's like, it's so crazy to think that that even existed at one point.
I
um
remember
yeah.
I can't remember what it was called, but there was this website that we had, and you would go into it and you would type whatever address it was, and it would give you
Right.
the directions, and I'd have to print it out sometimes because I was like, I don't know where I'm going this time, so I definitely have to print that off. But
Yeah.
yeah, to think people use maps to go across a whole sea kind of blows my mind. Like, I don't think half the people would ever survive in those times
Yeah, like
who are,
some didn't
here
even use
now.
maps. Like some of them use stars, and like to
Yep.
guide them.
I
Yeah.
think I think that is pretty cool. They were very, I feel like other civilizations that have lived before us were so advanced with the the astronomical,
Mhm.
astrological, I can't even say the word, but the stars and
Yeah.
constellations and yeah, traveling with stars. That's pretty cool. I do know of a documentary that I watched where they were talking about these people, and they had these it's almost kind of like a well, but it was just a
Mhm.
circle of water that they would have, and they had them strategically placed in different spots, and it was so that they could, when the sky was clear, they could look down in the water
Mhm.
to map the stars by looking down instead of looking up. So they were almost like mirrors that they could look
That is
into.
so genius. Like,
Is that crazy? I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I mean, these people were thinking very advanced. And there was another one where this guy was at I think it was a pyramid, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but
Mhm.
he had the gentleman that he was with standing like extremely far away. And he was like, this place was made for you to stand here and talk to millions of people
Mhm.
without having to have a speaker or anything. So he had him stand like really far away, and he's like, whispers, and he's like, can you hear me? And the guy was like, oh my gosh. He was freaking out
Yeah.
because it's like,
Yeah.
I'm so far away. How is that even possible? But like when someone discovered that, that has to be very eye-opening to think, however many years ago that was, those people were thinking about reaching a bigger crowd by using their senses to understand how their environment worked, to do that.
No, that's like really crazy to even think about. Like the old world, I guess, had so much like novel solutions. They weren't high tech in ways that we would think, but it's still so crazy how they came up with these ideas still. Like I always thought up till this point, like they were looking up and like trying to sketch the stars. But when you said that thing, I was like, oh my god, that makes
It
sense. Why
I
did I think
know.
of
When I
that?
watched that, I couldn't believe. I was like, that is the most genius thing that I think I've ever heard of. I was like, wow,
Yeah, yeah. Like it kind of reminds me of that meme where the Harvard University like sends you a text. It's like, you want a scholarship, bro. Uh, uh,
that is winning
yeah,
right
like
there.
honestly, like that's how it is when you describe these types of things. I think yeah, there are so many ideas, like the one that you spoke of with the sound. I'm like, how did they even come up with those things? It's so crazy to think about. And sometimes thinking about how they constructed a lot of these monuments and everything, and for them to even like stand the test of time, more importantly, like I'm sure you have seen the memes of roads built by the Romans, and then the engineers came, and how the road how they are. And
I saw that the other day. Oh my
yeah,
gosh, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
it was so funny, but somewhere along the way, I don't know what happened. I guess like we just, I don't know. It's just the quality just went downhill for some reason. We are living in a advanced, quote unquote, advanced civilization, but sometimes it feels like things are made out of cardboard. They can
I
just
agree. This guy
easily.
one time said something about, we think that we're the greatest civilization that ever lived. And he was like, get real, okay? He was like, we have evidence of way more smarter people who lived a long time ago, okay? I was like, yeah, okay, you're definitely, I agree on that. I agree on that.
If
Yeah,
there's
just
one, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
no, I was just gonna say, just to think of, I don't know if we'll ever know, or if any generation will ever know, who actually built or constructed the pyramids or any pyramid that's on any continent, which there are many in several places that were, to our knowledge, not in communication with each other, which I find very interesting. Or, like I said, to our knowledge, we don't think that they were in communication with each other. But there's so many, like you said, monuments and mostly pyramids that just blow my mind. That will we ever know, how they were constructed or who constructed or helped construct? Just the evidence that they find with, there's certain chambers where there's 80-ton blocks that are well above people's heads. And it's to think about how the inside was constructed, but even just the out, both alone, it's just kind of mind blowing to think that, that those were built. And there's many other like them that people don't, know about, or really old cities that are underground, whole entire cities that people built. And for what reason, that it's mysteries that keep me definitely awake at night.
No, and rightfully so.
Right.
Yeah, because like I kind of started my spiritual journey in like 2012, like watching Ancient Aliens. I'm sure you remember that
Oh,
show on
Ancient
history.
Aliens are
Yeah,
amazing. That guy, his meme was
yeah,
like the most successful alien meme ever, and it's great because it could be used for
yeah.
so many things. But yes, I love that show.
Yeah, those guys can be a little over on top sometimes, but at the same time, I think they ignited the spark for a lot of people back in the day. And like what you said, like the pyramids, for example, like they are on three separate continents. There are pyramids in China, there are pyramids in Egypt, there are pyramids in South America. If you were to spread them across a map, these are separate civilizations, and you really have to wonder how they came to be. Egypt, for example, one of the famous pharaohs that we know of is Cleopatra, but she's closer to the first McDonald's compared to the
Yes,
pyramids.
I know. That is really crazy. I've seen that.
It is, yeah. And but it makes much more sense when you think about how she came towards like the tail end of that civilization, towards the decline of Egypt. And so even those people didn't know who built those. Like they just accepted it because it was just there. They just assumed that some pharaoh before them built it. And there was just one thing, I think I saw this on Joe Rogan's podcast as well. A few guys came up on there and they were speaking about how a lot of the pottery and a lot of the tools that they were using, some of it was like just inherited from generation to generation. They didn't make some elaborate sculptures by themselves, like some were just inherited from the previous generations. So the ones that looked super advanced and like super precision, they weren't really made by them. Like you can actually tell
That,
the
yes.
difference. Yeah, yeah.
I don't know what documentary it was that I watched or where I saw this, but I do remember them talking about the decline of craftsmanship,
Hmm.
that they said, if you were at this level,
Hmm.
how do you go backwards from that, and how do you decline in craftsmanship with many different things that they had in the culture? But they were talking about they have pyramids that were built after those
Hmm.
pyramids, and they're nowhere even near close to it. They're almost rubble piles.
Yeah.
And it was an attempt, but it was made, like you said, maybe in like Cleopatra or that the end of that era,
Hmm.
that were replicating what they saw, but it wasn't, they just couldn't understand or come up with an explanation of how, if you're building at this advancement level, how do you go backwards? Like, how do you de-advance? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that, I think, is probably the key to understanding how the whole timeline of it works. Probably understood at this point that there were probably several different advanced civilizations at one point, and then things just kind of declined from there. And there might have been a couple of different cycles of that, because the Earth is pretty old. So I don't think it was just a one-off thing. Like there were
Yeah,
probably a couple of those cycles happening of like going advanced and then like regressing, and then yeah.
I do know that. I think it's, and I can't remember his name at this exact moment, but he's been doing his own research, and he said the Sphinx, what they've actually found is that there is, because I think when it was discovered, and whenever it was discovered, early 1900s or late 1800s, something like that, but it was up to its head in sand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when now how it is, it's, you know, obviously exposed. And they were talking about how the erosion on the Sphinx is actually not from what they assumed, which was something different, but it was actually water erosion. So they
Yes.
feel like the flood, one of the great floods, which
Mhm.
people want to say Noah, but I say the Great Flood of Gilgamesh. But they feel like it has been around for so long, and
Right.
that's proof of, you know, that they know that it's been there forever because of the way that it's eroding. It wasn't from sand and wind, it was from water erosion, and from over a long period of time, basically, is what they've found evidence of. But I thought that was pretty interesting. And I think, like you said, how it stood the test of time for so long. And how do you explain something like that when you just come upon it? And what do you think that person made of that, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the person that you were talking about, it's either Randall Carlson or Brian Hancock. I think.
Yes, Graham Hancock, yes, that
Right,
gentleman.
right,
I
right,
think
right.
he's been on Joe Rogan. I really enjoy his research, and I feel bad for people like him when they get their, you know, their theories or their research is shunned because, you know, mainstream scientists today or researchers don't want to accept someone else's alternative, being so close-minded. But he's done his research and he's put out his books, and I feel like there needs to be more people like him to give an alternative, because, you know, if you just have one thing and you think it's that, you know, what if that other spark could help somebody else, you know, find
Yeah.
something that we've never even discovered?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because I think like mainstream academia has said a few things, even though they are not fully accurate, they don't present it to kids or the world as like, okay, these are just theories, and we give it the room to, change down the line. Like that's not how they present information. They present it as like hard facts, like, okay, this is how it was, even evolution for that matter. Sure, it might be supported by many evidences there are, but like the fact is it's just a theory.
I agree.
There's a missing link for a reason. If evolution was perfect, then by right we should have seen the missing link on some level, like from ape to thing, but we have never gotten like concrete evidence as to like that missing link. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I know that all of my research that I've done, or documentaries that I watch and listen to while I'm working every day,
Mhm.
there's some pretty deep stuff out there
Mhm.
that I feel like could be pretty accurate. And the person who's describing these things, one of the first things he says is like 99% of your followers or your people are probably not going to believe what I have to say, because once someone has a reality of what is reality their whole life, you know, you say something like he has said, you know, just made
Mhm.
different claims of how society works or who's running society, and how
Mhm.
they're running it. um, it could be, and they've said this, I think there was a study done a long time ago where they talked about it would be detrimental to people if they were to kind of fully understand like where we truly come from, what this is, what reality truly is,
Mhm.
what we're capable of as human beings with our minds. I mean, we don't even use that much percentage of our brains, and if you could imagine us
True.
being at a full capacity of using our brain, like, I just think we would be completely different human beings, where we would be healing ourselves, we would be having free energy. People wouldn't be in poverty, people wouldn't be starving, people wouldn't wonder where they're going to sleep every night. I feel like it would be a completely different world, but somehow we are guarded from that and we can't access that. I feel like some people can. I feel like some people can communicate with people who have passed over. I think that's a very interesting subject. I know there's a lot of fake people out there, but there are people
Yeah.
who have experiences with not only people who have passed in this physical world,
Right.
but other entities. They feel like they can speak to, different, I don't want to say species, but I mean, and in a sense we call each other humans, but I feel like we're more aliens than anybody else. So I mean, for us to call other things aliens, I think is kind of funny, because I mean, we are all so different looking and strange looking. I feel like when people describe aliens, they all describe a similar thing where it doesn't seem like they're distinctual in a way.
Right.
So I can only imagine what they would think if, they saw all of us on this big rock.
I mean, honestly, like even with regards to Earth, like I wouldn't be surprised if a part of us came from somewhere else. You mentioned Gilgamesh earlier on, Sumerians, the Mesopotamia. That's one of my favorite
Oh, yes.
civilizations. They
I
have
agree.
stories,
The
and I mean,
Anunnaki, I
yeah, the
think, is the
Anunnaki.
most
Yeah, yeah,
interesting subject. And a lot of people don't know about those stories, or that the stories that they read now are very old stories that are from times where we couldn't even comprehend, I guess.
yeah. And it's so crazy. Like the stories, that mythological stories, they date back thousands of years, and even the kings, I believe, like reigned for thousands of years, if I'm not wrong, which is crazy to think about. How can a king rule for thousands of years?
I I
Mm.
was just telling my friend today about a gentleman that I follow, and he was talking about kind of one of the leaders of this group. It's called the TLS. It's called the Light System. And basically what he does is he's like describing that they're basically like a spiritual CIA. And one of his like the main person, and then there's obviously lots of people below him, but he's a rabbi, and
Right.
he says that I can't remember how old he said he was, but he basically was saying that he's well over 100 years old, and I mean he's
Wow.
gonna keep going. And it's all about, like, I think they're like vegan, like, like they don't eat any type of animal products or whatever. So like their lifestyle, like if you want to think about like any type of like monk or people who are very spiritual people, their mindset in life is completely different. And he basically kind of describes that, like, people like him, people who are at a different frequency, people who are at what I would say like the fifth dimension or higher, as they can tap into different spiritual, I don't know, ways of life. And so their journey is different than us people who come, I feel like, to learn lessons through reincarnation. And there's certain people that are put here. I think he said, what else did he say? He said like each pope is selected, and people sometimes think that sometimes people are like reincarnation version of the same person, but he said like each specific kind of like religious leader is like picked specifically for that position, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was just watching Avatar last night. Yeah, you know how it's like passed from like one person to another. The whole, like, the spirit moves from one body to another in Avatar. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that
Is that the
franchise.
Airbender one? Is that
Yes.
what you're talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
really funny that you mentioned this, because my friend that I work with, she'll probably be listening to this. And the other day, my son had bought this shirt at a thrift store, and I looked at the shirt and I saw it different because my life experiences are different. But I didn't realize that I was wearing an Avatar of the Airbender shirt, and it
Right.
had like all the elements on it.
Right.
And this girl was like, "Oh, you're wearing a Avatar shirt," and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I am." And then she was like, "Not the blue people, Alex," and I was like, "Oh, the other one. Okay, no, I don't know about that." So she's
Oh,
gonna crack up that you're even mentioning this right now.
yeah. Like I think you would love that show. The anime
That's what they
especially.
both said too. There
Yeah.
was two of my coworkers like, "That's totally up your alley, Alex. You got to watch that."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I'm not too sure about the live action one, because I'm just like starting to watch it.
I think
But I
everyone
think
said the show is better, that the show is really good. That's what
yeah.
one of my coworkers said.
Okay, so when they spoke about the live action, I believe they might be talking about the movie that came out in 2010.
Yes,
You don't have to watch that. That's an abomination. You
that's
don't
what
have to
they
watch.
said.
Yes, so you don't have to watch that. But the live action that I'm speaking of is Netflix took those episodes and they made it into like a series, just the first season of it. And so I guess that would be slightly better in terms of it is definitely better in terms of the casting, the CG and everything. But I think you should just watch the OG material itself, because I think it has couple seasons. So like, the airbender, and then like what happens after that as well and stuff. And I think it's like right up your alley, like in terms of spirituality. Like that show explained chakras to me. Like that's how I learned about chakras. It's from that show.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, like it's really great in terms of how, even though it's fictional, but like the spiritual teachings and the values that they spoke of, it really resonates. Like I think that's why a lot of adults, like, who grew up with it, like still love it. And it's definitely right up your alley for sure. You'll definitely enjoy it for sure. So if you can watch it, I highly recommend doing so, because you're going to be entertained. Yeah.
You're the third person to recommend it, so I'm definitely gonna have to.
Yeah, because I think like it definitely opens up like our mind to a different possibility and stuff, because you spoke of reincarnation. Like the way they speak about it there, and like spirits and spirituality as a whole. It's definitely leaning towards the eastern side of things, but I learned a lot about spirituality. So yeah, like I think all signs are pointing you towards that, so you should definitely go and watch it then.
Some spirit guides telling me that I need to watch it. It needs to be in my life. So my son will be happy. He'll be like, I told you it was awesome. And now you're finally watching it.
Yeah. Because it's one of those franchises that I got into, and like it's definitely close to my heart for sure. And the creators were like inspired by like Star Wars and stuff as well. So if you're into Star Wars by any chance,
So
yeah.
growing up, that was like not necessarily Star Wars, but anything space. I feel like I did know about Star Wars and I did watch it with my stepdad. I remember going to see one of them in the theater, and the theater was so packed that we sat in the front row, and my
Right.
stepdad was like, I don't even care. This is going to be the greatest movie ever. We'll just have to deal with it. And I'm like, I don't care. But growing up, my mom worked for the cable company, and so we had HBO and all the channels, and we would either watch anything that was on HBO, which would be anything
Right.
from like Braveheart to The Patriot. But our main channel that we watched was the Sci-Fi Network, and that was my favorite channel because we would watch Stargate SG-1, we would watch like Star Trek, Twilight Zone, anything that was super creepy. I also had a babysitter, and I loved her to death because her daughter was one of my best friends growing up. But she would always watch Unsolved Mysteries. And I feel like that was a big part of me questioning everything with that show. And that had so many seasons, and it was so terrifying sometimes. Definitely not a show I would recommend people watching alone, because you could just get really creeped out real quick. um, but those were some of my favorite shows growing up for sure.
Yeah, I loved everything related to space as well, so I can really resonate with it. Like there are TV shows that are in my head that I don't even know the title to, and I'm still trying to find the name of some of those shows. So it's crazy. Yeah. Space has always been like just that, like what Spock says, it's like in Star Trek, it's like the final frontier. And you really want to see, like, what's out there. There's just that curiosity that just comes, when you just look up, you're like, what is out there? Because
I feel like that's
yeah.
how all civilizations have been like, and that's
Yeah.
why I don't want generations after us to lose that curiosity, and like I said, asking questions, knowing what's out there. um yeah, those shows definitely inspired, I feel like, our generation of people to be interested in that. Those people were really thinking ahead. And I've even found it's very interesting. So I do a lot of my documentary like finding on Tubi.
Okay.
It seems to be a funny way to say this, but I feel like they're the whistleblowers of America right now, because for entertainment wise, there's so many documentaries that are on there that people don't even know. I mean, I've seen Sasquatch documentaries that were made in the 90s that nobody probably even knows exist, that are actually really, really interesting, and just cool to see how, like, Native American people, names that they used to call them. I mean, they would call them skookum. That was one of the words that a Native American group called them. Wasn't Sasquatch. Another group called them that, but there would
Right.
be different names that they would call this. This I don't even know what you would call it, but they just had these funny names, and I just think about, how they've reached an audience with people, and it's free. So I just find all these crazy documentaries on there, and it's probably one of my biggest research finds, I guess you could say, is going on there and just watching everything that I can, anything that I can, all the different theories, all the different conspiracies. I definitely recommend that for people if they're interested in anything. Now, there's some weird stuff out there,
Right.
but if you filter through it, you can find, like, really, really informative stuff. Like I said, I don't judge people on what
Mm-hmm.
they want to believe in.
Right.
And I think if you have the courage enough to make a whole documentary about something that you feel strongly about, like, that's inspiring to me as an artist.
That's a very good point. Like the last part where you mentioned how okay they believe in it enough to make a documentary. That's a very valid point, because some of these can be out there, in terms of theories, and you're like, can it be this crazy? Can it be this wild? Like at this point
Right.
in my life, I wouldn't be surprised if I saw anything, because I'm like, I've been, exposed to Star Wars. I've seen a lot of
Right.
these films. I know how this stuff works. I'm like, sure, but at the same time, you also think like, how crazy is crazy enough? Like, where do you draw the line? Because like one conspiracy theory, I guess, that I wanted to maybe discuss with you was like the flat Earth theory.
Well, that's
Uh,
what I was just about to get into with you
yeah,
about that.
yeah,
Yes. So,
bec-
like I
yeah.
said, I don't judge people,
Mhm.
and I've the documentaries that I found on Tubi, I found one about flat Earth, I found one about the hollow Earth, and then of course, just people saying that it's round. Um, I find them all so very interesting. The flat Earth one um, really kind of gets me, because there's a lot of different evidence that they have. But then I listen to this hollow earth theory, and then I'm like thinking, wow, well, they have a lot of good evidence on that one too. Um, the one that I just watched recently, I think it's called The Curve, is what it's called. And then there's another one called Rocket Man, where his name's Mad Mike. And sadly, he passed away in 2020, but he was the first human to build their own rocket and
Oh
shoot
wow.
themselves up into the air. I think Joe Rogan said his first attempt, he got 1.6 miles into the air, but he's basically like a Wright brother for
Right.
space. I mean, he was building his own stuff and had his own ideas. And that was his plan. His plan was to shoot this rocket all the way up into the space atmosphere as much as he could, and take his own view and take his own pictures, to prove to people if it was. And there's people that are like, well, what if you get up there and it's round? He's like, okay, then it's round, but I'm going to find out for myself. Like, I want to find out, because I don't feel like anyone else is being truthful about it. So if I build my own rocket and I go up there, then and it was very inspiring. Like, it to people, they're like, oh, flat earth, that's so stupid. Okay, maybe it is stupid, but to these people who have experienced different things or have
Hmm.
researched different things, their experiences aren't the same as yours. And if you're closed-minded enough to, like, not even hear people's ideas, without criticizing them, people can. There's a guy in the documentary, and he said, I was just so sick and tired of people, like, calling me an idiot. And he was like, I didn't like that, and
Hmm.
he's just like, I just made a joke out of it, make fun of me, call me a flat earther. But he's like, but this is something that I feel strongly about. And, and that's okay that I can feel that way about it. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, don't let people discourage you. Like, if you would have thought about, Albert Einstein or anyone who people would deem had a mental disability, if they listened to every person who discouraged them, they would have never accomplished the things that they did. They kept continuing to go, regardless if people called them the C word, which I call crazy. But
I was like, what is he
yeah,
referring to?
no, that's my new C word, is crazy, because that's what people will be calling all these people. And
Right.
I just find it interesting. But my mind and my experiences and my openness to possibilities is why I am accepting of people's theories, because, like I said earlier, nobody knows the whole truth, and if they do, they're not telling us. But we have to find our own answers. And that's why I think researching, the Anunnaki and the tablets of Gilgamesh and all that stuff, like that's part of our story. It's part of a story that's been hidden. And, maybe there's answers if the earth is flat or not in those tablets, but, we don't know unless we try to research it. And there's a lot of great people out there who are doing hard work, who are sometimes putting their life on the line.
Right.
Especially like in the UFO disclosure, like that's a big thing that's happening right now. Like, you're not allowed to talk about certain things, especially in a public setting, because there's certain rules. Yes, we're disclosing things, but there's going to be rules to this disclosure and what is disclosed. There's going to be things we won't ever see. That is evidence. And that's sad because we have so much evidence that can't be shared with the public because they don't feel like we're ready for it. But, yeah, I feel like that's a huge mystery for people. The hollow earth theory I find very interesting too. There was an Admiral Byrd. He was with the military, with the U.S. I can't remember how big of a fleet they sent with him to Antarctica.
Right.
But his experience, do you know about his experience at all?
I think I've heard of it. Like, I think I know it has something to do with an airplane of sorts. Like, I know they ventured
Yes.
in and they were like, oh no, yeah. Like, I
Something
kind of
about how
vaguely
they find like a
yeah.
whole ecosystem,
Yes.
basically.
Yes.
And he documented all of this. This is actual documentation of his, I wouldn't say a diary, but, his journal of his experience. And that's something that a lot of people don't know about. So it's like, is it flat? Is it flat? And somehow when you go into the hollow earth, which they would call a hole, maybe that's a portal of some sort to another world, which he basically described that they had their own ecosystem. He said they had their own sun, they had their own kind of like everything that we have, which I found very interesting, that's how he described it.
Yeah. I mean, it's only fueled, further when we see movies like Godzilla or Kong, where they kind of depict all the things that we are speaking about, and there's that whole conspiracy. Of course, I'm sure you're familiar with it, where it's like they are preparing, people for that revelation of
Yes.
sorts
Oh, I've
through
said that
through
so many
through.
times.
Yeah,
I've
but
told my
here's what,
tattoo artists, I feel like entertainment is the best way I can describe it. I feel like it's their way of seeing how the public would react to a reality. Does that make sense?
yes,
Like,
absolutely.
yes, vampires don't exist, but we're going to see how you would take it if there are people out there killing people at random because they have to live off blood. How would you react to an alien space invasion? Just the one that really gets me, the best one that I've recently come across is, it's my absolute favorite, but the new Spider-Man with Miles Morales. And I felt like that was such a powerful, are you ready for multiple dimensions? Are you ready to
Right.
understand that you are going through this in like a million different worlds, but
Mm-hmm.
differently? You know what I mean? Like, it
Yeah.
was, and just to think I was just talking to my friend, there's this thing in Switzerland. It's like it's a machine that helps them look back in time to see how space was created. People call it a time machine, but there's just stuff like that in that movie, that's kind of what they, they're ripping the fabric of time, and they are going into each other's worlds. And Miles wasn't supposed to be Spider-Man. Like,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
was an accident, and I just thought that was so powerful that he decided that wasn't going to be, that he was going to make his own destiny. I love that so much.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I always love that kind of stories where it seems like it was a mistake, but like it was really that person having that free will to make their own decisions and stuff. Uh,
Yes.
and recently, there's been an uptick in terms of all the multiverse kind of movies as well. That's an interesting take on it, like how maybe they are preparing us for it. Like I didn't think of it that way until you brought that up for the specific examples of multiverse.
I
Yeah,
just posted this yesterday, but there was this lady who's interviewing parents when the movie Alien came out.
right.
Um, and this lady's outside and she's asking all these parents, do you regret taking your child to see this movie? And this guy's being interviewed and he's like, no, ma'am, I don't. He said, this could be a true story and you never know. And I was like, oh my God, that's me.
Yeah, I
I'm
love
over here
that.
like,
I love that
educate yourself.
accent. The country accent. It just makes
Oh my God,
everything.
it was perfect. If someone goes, he's the Zach Galifianakis. I can't say his last name, but he was basically like Zach Galifianakis, but like as a real person. And it was just like the funniest thing. So it's like, that is me. I can relate to this so bad because my son Xavier's always like, you're always talking about Sasquatch and UFOs. And he's like, the people at your work probably think you're a weirdo. And I'm like, no, the people at my work love me. And one of my coworkers bought me a Sasquatch sticker for my car and he's flipping you off.
Oh,
I
I love
said, they
that.
love me. Okay.
Oh, I love that. I love that stuff.
Um,
Because I saw a lot of those like Sasquatch stuff on in Michigan as well. Um, and yeah, like I love that all the murals and all the signs and especially like the stickers that you mentioned that people put up in their cars. I love that. But one thing that terrifies me about flat Earth, to be very honest with you, is
yes.
if it is true, like I don't think it is, I hope not kind of way, because like that would mean most of our lives we have been taught, something that's not factual, and like that would just mess with my perception of reality as I see it, to the point where I'm not sure if I can recover from it, if that makes sense. Like
I
that.
think that's I think that that statement that you just made is why
Yeah.
they're keeping it from everybody, because it would be, and that's what one of the guys in the documentary said. He said, sometimes the truth is not pretty and it is very disturbing. And are we ready for that? But he described it like this. Okay. He says, okay, you're in a dream, right? And you're on a beach and you're sipping margaritas. Okay.
Right.
But in reality, your house is on fire. Do you want to wake up from that dream, or do you want to keep sipping the margaritas on the beach? And
Yeah,
he's like,
yeah.
that's kind of hard. It's not a good reality maybe to wake up to, but I feel like what we know or what we've been taught, yes, is a lot of that is from an agenda and not factual. But I think I don't want to live in a matrix anymore, and I don't want to see people. I feel like we're losing people. A lot of technology is, yes, very advanced and great for our civilization, but there's also a
Mhm.
lot of advancements in technology. I mean, even back to the atomic bomb, of just making things that our environment and frequency of this earth does not need. There's When people were living thousands of years ago, no one was putting atomic bombs in outer space or in the ocean. I mean, that to me blows my mind, that I see how civilizations of advancement can decline because some small group of people make bad choices for the masses, and
Mhm.
ultimately change generations of people, trauma,
Right.
like tremendously. The effects that what is the need for these weapons? Like, what is,
Right.
of mass destruction. Basically, it's just kind of crazy.
It
I mean, I
it
think
is
about it in my
terrifying. Yeah.
mind about
Yeah.
like when they put it in the ocean. I mean, me as a human now, just thinking about the effects of the ecosystem. Like, how could you not think? Yes, it's it's the largest uh, mass that we have on this earth. It's what we're mostly made of, and just to think that you think you can put something inside of it and blow it up and think it's not going to affect, the wildlife or whoever's living in the ocean, is just kind of crazy to think that people have lost attachment to nature and
100%.
to what we
Yeah.
are,
Yeah. 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 Um. Yeah.
because
Like
we're all a
I.
part of that.
No, we absolutely are, and we are so disconnected from the whole thing. I just wanted to, yeah, wrap up the flat Earth thing. The
Yes.
reason why I said that was, like, if that is true, technically, if you think about it, then the sun may not be a quote unquote star. Like, it might be something else, and it might actually be the same size as the moon because of how, during an eclipse, like, it perfectly, you know um
Yeah, I know
covers it.
exactly what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
I
yeah.
heard
So
something about this the other day.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So if the Earth is flat, then chances are the sun is not as big as we think of it, in a way. And then, we also then, which begs the question, that what are stars? Are there other planets, and are they round? So, like, there's just so many questions. And also, like, how many people are hiding this? That's a whole nother question I was thinking about. Like, you're telling me, like, everyone is on this. How many people are on this conspiracy? Or, like, how many people are hiding the truth, if it is true? And that number is, like, the more I think about it, I'm like, that can't be right. Like, surely somebody must be like, the math ain't math. Like, like, surely someone must voice it out. But, like, the more I think about it that way, I'm like, I wouldn't know what to believe in. And, like, that example you said, like, it reminds me of that scene from, I think it was the first Matrix movie, where the guy is eating a beefsteak or something. And he's like, I know this isn't real, but
Yes,
it's just so good, or something. That's how I feel like about some of these things. Yeah.
I love that. That's one of my favorite. I love the new one too. I love how they kind of full circled that whole trilogy thing. I love that.
I've not watched the new one. Is it worth watching? Like,
Oh my god, I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. Like
yeah,
I was like, I watch documentaries. That's all I usually watch, and
right.
I can turn on a documentary, and if in the first minute, sometimes even 30 seconds, I'll be like, yeah, that's a no for me, and I move on to the next one. It has to be. I have to find certain ones. I can't. There's certain ones that I can't watch, but I've researched so many of them. But on a rare occasion, I do like watching movies, and I have to watch. It sounds funny to say this, but I cannot watch mainstream just trash that people watch. It has
Right.
to be something that is intriguing to me. I've been through so much trauma that boring main stuff I just can't relate to it. So I need to watch something that's going to intrigue me and make me question or make me terrified,
Hmm.
just anything that can get emotion out of me. I feel like and that movie was fantastic. Like I was like, wow, okay, yeah, that was really good. I think I even watched it more. I think I watched it with somebody else too, because I if I like something, like
Hmm.
a series or something, I will watch it over and over and over because I will find things that I didn't see before, or I'll just do as background noise because it's comfortable to me because I know kind of
Right.
how it goes. But that was one that I was like, yeah, I like that. That was good.
Awesome. 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 Okay, then I'll definitely watch it. Then I'll definitely watch
Yeah,
it. Yeah, because I was, like, wondering, okay, is it like a necessary addition to the trilogy? But yeah, like, now that
it's
you
good.
say it, I'm gonna watch it then, for sure. Yeah, but even that whole prospect of like Matrix, like, that opened up a whole new, realm of ideas and stuff for people. But, like you say, like, I think, if that is the case, like, if your house is burning, then you should, disconnect and definitely go and save your house. Like, I think that's, like, without a doubt.
And that's
But
what
at
I
this
feel like our
Yeah.
truth is. Like the fire is our truth, and
Mm-hmm.
we might not want to like put it out or, deal with it because it might be pretty crazy. But I think it would help not only our generation, but for future generations, that they're not in this continuous cycle of how we're living. Like, there's a
Absolutely.
lot of times when I have 4 kids and I work every day of the week, and I'm a single parent. So I pay for all the bills. And if I don't show up to work every day and I
Mm-hmm.
don't work every day, then my bills don't get paid, or, stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. So to me, I just wish life was so much simpler. Like, I just want to be on a nature trail with my kids, enjoying nature and being with my kids. And it's sad that we have to be in this reality where everyone's working just to die, and no one is being creative anymore. Like we said earlier, craftsmanship and artistry was
Yeah.
so much different, and in times that people could even see what people made, thousands of years ago with sculptures. I find sculptures so interesting because that the time and the craftsmanship it takes for someone to do that, that's been lost. And I just want people to not lose that. And I feel like a lot of the younger generations are just on their phones and they're so disconnected. They're not in nature. They're not connecting with each other. They're looking for dopamine because that's what they've been fed their whole life, is having those highs for very short periods of time, and not finding joy in things that they call boring. They're like, oh, this is boring. It's like nature walks are like the best. My kids love, that's like one of our favorite things to do.
Mm-hmm.
They call it Sasquatch hunting, and it could be a little terrifying sometimes, but we enjoy it. Like, we're gonna go camping
Right.
hopefully this summer. That's what my 13-year-old, he said, I want to go camping. I said, do you think we're going to get any sleep? I'm going to be terrified of every branch that snaps from a squirrel because I'm going to think it's Sasquatch. I'm like, but I'll take you camping, buddy. So I hope, that people can be inspired to get out. But it's just, I don't want people to keep living like this. And if finding out the truth helps people to get to a peaceful place for everyone on this earth, I think that would be like amazing. I think if finding out if the earth was flat, that would be kind of detrimental. But thinking about it, in my eyes, I feel like
You have
we
to
live
rip
in
the band-aid off, essentially.
yeah, kind of, but we live in a sensory world. So like everything is senses, and like what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're feeling. If we couldn't see, say we were all just blind,
Right.
and we had to use our other senses, our world would be so different. And I feel like maybe that's what it's like for people who have crossed over. Like, you see each other as lights, you still communicate, you can still communicate sometimes with people who are still
Right.
here, but we use different senses. And I think what we see can be almost like a Rorschach test. Everyone sees things differently, everyone experiences things differently,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, what we're seeing, is that really what it is? We could look at the earth and go out, say me and you went in a rocket ship right now, and we went up and we saw that it was round. In our eyes, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it really, to our eyes, that's what it
Mm-hmm.
is. But in reality of how we comprehend things with our brain, is it really round? Is it really flat? Like,
Yeah,
how do we
that is
determine
what.
what
Yeah,
is
like
what?
exactly. Yeah, that's
Do
another
you get what
question
I'm
as well.
saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like our
So, like,
sensory.
that's why I
Yeah.
feel like it wouldn't be as detrimental to me. Because, like, the guy was like, you know what? If it is round, it's round, and if it's flat, it's flat. But like, it's not going to change much for me. Like, kind of how he explained it. But I feel like I would be okay with it either way, because regardless of that, I'm still walking around in this physical, whether the earth is round or whether it's flat, I'm still walking around and somehow being a frequency energy who's affecting other frequencies and energy that are in my own
Right.
reality.
Right. 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 Yeah, I just meant it in that sense, like that would make me question everything.
Everything. And I think that's why I question everything, because I know the truth has been twisted for so long. There's a funny example, and my mom's gonna laugh at this, but I think I was in third grade, and the teacher that I had at the time was describing this very peaceful relationship between Native Americans and pilgrims. And kind of how my mom described it as a child was that's not how it was. You know, these people were forced off their land, forced into reservations, were treated very badly.
Right.
And yes, maybe they made choices also that weren't great fighting back, but what's a person to do when someone comes in and, you know, harms people that they care about and land that they've been, you know, taking care of for so long. But I went to school the next day and I just told all the kids in my class, that lady's a liar. Like, there was no peacefulness between these people. And my mom got a phone call from the teacher and was like, well, Alex was telling everybody about the Indians and the pilgrims. And I was like, yeah, that's probably when it all started. I was telling everybody about conspiracy theories even in third grade. So
I love that. That's awesome. That like
spreading the
you
truth,
questioned
that's
it.
kind of been
Yeah.
my thing. Or, you know, what is factual that I can't actually say is what happened.
Yeah. Like I've always like tried to, find out about things as well. But I've never gotten to the point that you did, especially at the time that you did, for sure. But it's really inspiring, that and even the courage as a as a third grader, like to go out and to believe in to question truth and like different perspectives. I think that that's a really great quality. I think one thing that I try to have in my mind is just having an open mind, just even like entertaining the most wackiest of theories, and
Yes.
just keeping an open mind, because like the thing is, I always ask myself, well, how do you know? Your perception of truth is so limited. So you wouldn't know. And like I always tell myself, like one thing that I can never get enough of is perspective. Like literally, I don't know what, like, let's say if I'm walking on a road, I don't know what I look like from like above, or like from the side view, or like how an ant views me, or like how an eagle would see me.
Right.
Right, yeah, we would never get enough perspectives of the same thing. Like it's so crazy. And so for me, it's like, just keep an open mind. Like you never know what's truly out there. uh like I had a spooky experience. Like I told you, I went to Michigan. Like I had a very spooky experience. Like I don't really believe in a lot of those, like
I got some
fairy.
good stories for you.
Yeah. Like, are you aware of, like, I don't know what is it called? I think it's like fairies, or like I think it's like elves or something in the forest.
Oh,
I don't know what
yeah.
is it called
Yes.
exactly, but like the person that I was going with, she's a friend, and they like brought me, and she was kind of spooked out the whole time for some reason. Like I don't know why, but she's like, I feel like we are being watched. She's like more like very spiritually inclined in a way, almost like those witchy vibes, as she would
Yes.
describe it. So yeah, she was like, I don't know, right? Like I'm getting spooky vibes and everything. And then it's so funny, like this person and I, we are the most incompatible creatures on the planet, like for context, right? and and at the same time, for some reason that evening, like we were on sync. So we would go into this trail, and so it's called Stony Creek Trail in Michigan. So if anybody wants to go and look it up, feel free to do so. So we're going in this trail, and we take the exact turns. Like she looks at a path, like I'll look at the same path, like an off-beaten path, for example, because this trail has like many different pathways and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And she's like, yes, I think we should go here. And I'm like, okay, great. Yes, I was thinking the exact same thing. And this happened almost at every single turn. And yeah, she got so spooked out at one point. She's like, we need to have like markers or some sorts in case we get lost. And I kid you not, this is what I did. I stacked up stones. And there's a reason why I'm saying this part of the story, because it gets really interesting later on. So I stack up stones, like, as a marker. So if I were to come back to that same spot,
Yes.
I can identify, right? So basic Boy Scout stuff. And so like we go, and there's this one point, there's like three different pathways, and we decide, and again, same thing, like we took a decision the exact same way again. Like, we're going this path, absolutely we are. That's exactly what I'm thinking. Like, at this point, we are not even communicating, but we are in so much in sync, which is crazy again, because like, we are the most incompatible creatures on the planet. Like, I have to
It was
say
like
that because,
something was guiding
yeah,
you both.
exactly. And we go, and finally there was this one path, and it was like a side, it wasn't like the main trail or something. It was like this, just this, like,
Me and my son call
offshoot.
it a side quest. We went on a
Yeah,
couple side quests yesterday, and I told him, I said, we can't go far because, like you said, I was like, how do we mark? And now I'm gonna know. I'm gonna stack stones if we ever do that again. But he did. He was like, maybe we shouldn't venture off too far. And I was like, it's getting dark. We probably shouldn't.
yeah, like, I'm gonna later tell you why stacking stones is pretty useless in that situation, and I'll tell you that, which is why it spooked me out. But we went into this side quest, and right off the bat we get like kind of like eerie vibes, but it's also surprisingly welcoming. Like, there was literally a sign with a butterfly, a board or something, and then it said like welcome, which is already like
Creepy
pretty,
enough.
like, weird. And then, like, we go, and then there's like this like concrete slab, and there's like a fallen tree, and turns out like people leave stuff behind on that tree. People tie bands, or they put a photo or something like that. And then there was this like weird message there as well, like, oh, leave a part of you behind or something like that. And so,
Like an offering tree.
something like that, yes, something like that, something like that, I don't know what it
Okay.
was
Yeah.
called. Yeah, but it was exactly like, I think it was an offering tree, and there was like Polaroid photos, and like clips of
What? That
sorts.
is interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so my friend, she was like, okay, I'm called to leave something. And then she left her scrunchie, and then I kind of took a string from my bag, and we tied it together. And at that the same point, there was a wasp, like, just hanging around, and it kind of bit me. And my finger like got swollen, and she was like, okay, I am getting the eerie vibes, I think we should get out of here, like, we should go. And she's like, just come quick, just pack your shit, let's go. And because I carry my gimbal everywhere I go, and I'm that kind of guy. So she's like, get everything, we're gonna go. And then we left, and then we just made like, we still went into the trail. We try to go a little bit further, but it was getting dark, like you said. She's like, okay, I think we should turn back at this point. And I was like, okay, sure. And we turned back, and we started walking. Firstly, the the side quest path we went into, that was gone. I kid you not, like, it was
What?
gone. Yeah, that. And this wasn't even the best part of it. So there were two girls like coming, and one girl was like dressed up in like an 18th century kind of clothing, like how they would dress up during like the Salem witch trials or something. So that
Yeah.
was, yeah, it was already, I mean, there were people like, sparingly kind of like located, and we weren't too far away from the civilization as well. Like, I went into Google Maps, and I saw like we weren't too far off from like a main road or something, like,
Yeah.
within the trail. But it was like, at that point, like, I didn't know, because we were like surrounded by vegetation and stuff. And so these two girls came, and my friend was like, yeah, yeah, you guys should go, there's like there's a side path there. It was pretty interesting and stuff. Just be careful though, because my friend got bit by a wasp or something. And that was so weird, and I was just like staring at my friend, because she was like, why were you looking at me so weirdly? And I was like, don't you like recognize, like, when you spoke about the side path down the road, like, that's exactly where the side path was. Like, yeah, like, it wasn't down the road, it was the exact spot where the girls were standing. She was like, are you kidding me? I was, no. And that's what I was looking at you like so weirdly. And then, as though that wasn't enough, so we started beelining, we started like beelining towards like where our car was, and it was pretty far away. And coming back to the stone markers that we placed, it was kicked away. Like, somebody actually like kicked away or something, like, I don't know. Like,
What?
yeah, like, it was crazy, because I was like, I knew exactly where I placed it, I recognized that spot. And she was like, yeah, it's like those like, forest elves or something. Like she's like, yeah, some of them are very cheeky, mysterious, and like, mischievous, sorry. And
Oh, I have a
yeah,
story for you after you tell me this.
sure. And yeah, and throughout, like, coming back, like, we almost got lost at one point, and she's like, nope, that's not the path, we have to turn back. And she's a little older than me as well, so she knew stuff like better than me, I guess. She was like sometimes I'll just be talking, and then she'll be like, just pause, and then she'll just look around, and I'm like, bro, you're scaring me right now. Like, like, dude, I don't have anything with me right now. Like, yeah, we have to fight with sticks and stones at this point. Like, literally, if something comes out, like, you're scaring the heck out of me.
That is part of my second story that I'm going to tell you. But
Okay. Yeah, and that
the
was it. And like, we were just driving back, and I just told her, like, the spot where you spoke of, like, that's where the side quest thing opened up. And like, when you spoke to those girls, that's why I was looking at you so weirdly, and it was crazy. Like, I still don't know. And the only thing there that I can find was, like, it was called the Sheldon Trail or something, and there was an estate of sorts and everything, and they eventually, like, demolished it and whatnot. I don't know if it had anything to do with that, but yeah, that was it. Like, but it was spooky enough for me. Yeah.
that is amazing. One of the Sasquatch documentaries that I watched,
Yeah.
I can't remember what he called them, but he said basically how he described it was there was the big people, like the Sasquatch.
Mm-hmm.
There was, I think he called them the Eldas. I don't remember what he called them.
Okay.
And then there was people like us. And he said the big people and like the little elf people, they lived up on the mountains. Okay. And when settlers came through and started bringing all these really neat trinkets and little things that they had never seen before, the little elf people came down from the mountains and they came to the valley, and they liked all the new trinkets that the pioneers were bringing. And whenever they decided that they were done and had their fun, they went back up the mountain, and the Sasquatch said, no, if you want to participate in what's down there, then
Mm-hmm.
you're going to stay down there and you're no longer welcome up here. You cannot live here anymore. And they almost kind of like the Amish community. If you do, when Amish kids turn like 18, they're allowed to drink and smoke and do whatever they want because they expose them to the reality of outside of their world. And
Right.
they either pick to stay in that world, or they get shunned and you're not allowed to come back. And it's very similar with Sasquatch apparently and elves. And that's why we sometimes see them, and people have sightings of them, and there's actually more sightings than people realize. But like she said, they are very mischievous. They're very trickster. How they describe them in movies, I feel like, is a
Right.
very good perception of them. The way people like Native Americans describe them, I never thought about that. When I'm watching all these Sasquatch documentaries, I was like, oh my gosh, the little elf people, like, of course, like, why wouldn't there be documentaries about those as well? And I've heard a lot of theories of like they live in the rocks, that when, explosions of rocks by dynamite, by people who are trying to build or do things, that truly disturbs a lot of like paranormal or entities like that, because those are actually their homes, for that we can't like comprehend, if that makes sense. But I thought that story was interesting because that was a story that really stood out to me. I think I actually posted that video on my Instagram because I thought, wow, that's really interesting to think, like, if you're not going to continue to live our lifestyle that we've been living, and you're going to go down there and mess around with those humans,
Mm-hmm.
you can just stay down there. I thought, wow, like Sasquatch has some, like, they have a line, like, don't cross that line because they won't allow you back. You're either
That's
one with nature
interesting.
or
Yeah.
not. And I
Yeah. Like.
thought maybe that's why their civilization has been around for so long, is because they are so simple. They live a very simple life. They have families and they take care
Mhm.
of each other. People think a great civilization is because we're advanced and we have technology, but if you can shelter and food and clothe, if you need to, your people and your community, like, I think that's advanced because you're taking care of each other. And I think that's what the Sasquatch, you know, community, to me, it seems like. And there's also theories out there too about how, the one time, most people think of Sasquatch, they think of a lone male Sasquatch, on his own, but people don't realize that there's been sightings of female Sasquatch, with young, who are, holding their hand walking across the street as a human would.
Right.
Same affectionate type things. They make nesting in homes. They build nests. They have the ability to use their hands to make things. I've heard, we look a lot like, I was glad you mentioned that trail story, because that's kind of what I was going to tell you about last night when we were at the Burr Oaks trail. And for anyone who wants to check that out, it's a pretty awesome trail. It was, I think it said 300 million years ago, the limestone was carved out because it used to be a sea, where you're at. And so
Wow.
when the water level receded, over time, weather and just wear, carved out these limestone rocks. And they're amazing because you can get up and you can climb on top of them and like basically jump from rock to rock. Like, it's one of the most amazing experiences, and it's one of our favorite trails that we like to go. We just like to go connect with nature. My son even said the other day, he's like, do you know how we argue sometimes when we're in the home? He said, but when we come out here and we're on this nature trail, like, we're so like at peace, and like we can just like be, and that's what made me want to not be working anymore and just like spending time in nature with my kids. It was just like, even my son could see the positive of like being in nature and like trying to be one with nature and just being with each other. But the whole time we're on this trail, every time we go out there, we do funny things. We try to do the tree knocking. We've never got a response before, but we've heard things out there before. And my son has had an experience with a friend when he went camping. I've had a personal experience. I have never actually seen a physical being, but I feel like what your friend described at the trail you were at, I know that feeling of being watched. I've been in a situation where I felt the exact same, almost like you're being hunted, like you're the prey and there's a predator that's watching you, and you have this
For
like
sure.
instinctual feeling to
Yeah.
be aware of your surroundings. So I know what that is like. I've had that feeling before a couple times. And so we go out on this trail, and this trail is very familiar to us. So like I said, we've been on it many times. Like, it's one of our favorite trails. We love going out there. So last night Xavier's like, well, let's go. And it was about 5 o'clock and the sunset was 6. And so I was like, okay, well, we got like an hour. We can finish the trail in an hour if we don't go on too many side quests,
Right.
And of course we went on some side quests because that's what we always do. And, we walked down to a very steep hill down to there's like a creek that's really cool. And we went down there a long time ago. So we were like, we got to go back down for old time's sake. So we go down there. Then we go on another trail that we've never been on and found this amazing tree with mushrooms. And we were just having the greatest time. And of course, we got on the Sasquatch subject and we're laughing about memes that I've posted or reels that I've posted. And, we got on all these different subjects of the topic. And next thing I know, it's dark. I mean, it is dark. And me and my son are just like, like, there's a whole different vibe out here in the dark. Like, when you're going on this trail and it's light out, it's just a completely different environment.
Right.
And we had never experienced that. We'd always been out there during the daylight. So me and my son are experiencing this like darkness kind of feel, and so it's kind of spooky already. And we're talking about Sasquatch, and we hear, a squirrel run, and we're laughing about this, And I was just telling my friend this today because it was the oddest experience. And I have many theories and conspiracies that I dive into, and I have lots of rabbit holes that I go down. But when you experience something, it's very different.
It is.
Hearing about something and learning about something
Yes.
and experiencing it are two completely different things. And I've experienced many different paranormal things, which, you know, maybe we'll have another podcast and we can talk about
Oh, we can
more
dive right in
stories,
as
because
well. I love.
I have so many stories. I feel like we could talk all night. But so we're walking, and I kid you not, as I'm talking about the Men in Black, and I'm not talking about like Will Smith and the movie. I'm talking about like the people who make you
Right.
uncomfortable and are always around for the weird stuff, you know? And I'm talking about this, and I swear, on this trail, we're almost at the end of it. And out of nowhere, this black figure spawns. And I swear, like, it just came out of nowhere. And the first thing that I said after I realized that it was a human figure, and it was of normal size, I said, "Oh, well, just thank God you're not Sasquatch." And I said it out loud. And my son Xavier kind of laughed and said something else. Well, he also noticed this when he was telling my friend the story. He said, "You know, normally when people pass us on the trail, they say hi, or, you know, nod their head, or they do something. They acknowledge that you're
Mhm.
there."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
This gentleman was in complete black. And when I mean he was in complete black, like I told my friend, I couldn't even describe to you the clothing that he was wearing, because it was so black and so fitting to his body. He was bald. He had no hair. Um, he didn't have any expression. He just walked by us extremely, um, very like monotone in a walk, just
Right,
very
right,
strange.
right.
And I thought that was kind of weird. And I looked at my son and I said, I think he had a headphone in. So maybe he was just trying to tune us out, you know?
Mhm, mhm,
And when
mhm.
we were on this trail, I had found a really huge walking stick, like a really big walking stick, and I had been walking with it the whole trail. We'd actually saw a couple with their kids, and the mom was like, "Oh, yeah, they're getting their magic stick." And I was like, "Oh, we got our magic walking stick too." You know, as a little kid, and we just had this
Right.
whole moment. And I was thinking so muchly that I picked that walking stick up, because when the man walked past us and he walked further away from us, my son turned around to look at the gentleman. And when he had turned around, the man was actually coming towards us, had turned around and was walking towards us, and then made this grunting noise of a kind of a ugh. And then when my son had that experience, he said, "Absolutely not. Nope." He turned around and he ran. And I tried as calmly as I could to not freak out. But the fact that this gentleman decided that he was going to go on a walk in the pitch dark, and he was in all black, I thought that was very strange. The fact that he didn't interact with us felt very, very uncomfortable and very weird. Which I know in this society, maybe some people don't, but it just
Right.
felt very eerie that this man came on the trail as soon as we were leaving. And as we were talking about that subject, and that he was in all black, I mean, it just seemed very coincidental that all those things came together at the same time.
That is crazy. Yeah, that's very eerie as well. Like as you're describing it, I was like, oh my god, yeah. Like I'm so glad like that happened towards the end of the trail.
That's
Like
what
not,
I said. Like, what if we would have,
yeah,
like, and I was glad that I had the stick, because I told Xavier, I said, if that man would have tried anything, whether he was human or not, I'm so glad I had that stick. I said, I think he probably would have tried to if I didn't. And I honestly thought about that when we were leaving. And the funny thing is, so when we pulled up, we parked, and when we parked, there was a car parked next to us, and there was
mhm,
two people sitting in the car. And then kind of like catty corner to us, or diagonal from us, there was a white car, and it was there when we pulled up. My son said it was there, and there was a lady in it. Um, but when we came out of the trail, that car was still there that lady was sitting in, but no one was in it. And there was no other cars in this. And it's hard to describe, but this is a big park, and they have like a nature center where you can go and see animals and stuff. But this trail is at the very end. So it's the very last, like it's a dead
right,
end. And
right.
so there's a big parking space. And my son swears that car was, I was like, it has to be that guy's car. But at the same time, the whole weirdness of like, we're talking about Sasquatch, we're talking about Men in Black, and then this man just appears out, and like it almost looked like, and maybe it was because he was not black that it seemed like he appeared out of nowhere. But it was just it was the most terrifying thing. And then I told my son, I think I would have been less terrified if it was Sasquatch. I kind of wish it would have been Sasquatch.
Honestly, yeah, like I was about to say that as well. Like I feel like Sasquatch, not that like
That would
you're pretty, yeah, but
it would have
like
been the better option for us.
would have been the better option of the two, it seems. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm glad like you guys came out of it pretty unscathed.
Yes.
That's what matters the most, I guess. But yeah, that is so crazy. How that turned out.
It
Yeah,
did
like
not help my conspiracy theory brain at all, because like my brain was just turning, and you get, like I said, that feeling of weirdness. The experience that I had with the Sasquatch is a good one. Where I grew up my whole life is a small town, which is now a big town, but it's called Grain Valley, and they have a park there. It's called Monkey Mountain, and that's been the name of that place forever. And when I moved to Grain Valley when I was 4, I remember my mom telling me this crazy story about how there was a circus train, and the circus train crashed, and all the monkeys got loose, and they all went up on the mountain. And as a child, I just thought that that's what it was, and all the kids in the town thought the same thing, and I never knew where this story came from. And I grew up, and like I'm a very curious person, and
right,
I thought, I remember that story, and I remember asking my mom, "Where did you even hear that from? Like, where did that even come from?" And I started doing my own research, and I found out that there's a big group of people actually all over the world who visit Monkey Mountain because they do Bigfoot research there. Like, I was kind of blown away that this story that was told was misinformation, and this person wrote an article about how that was a a theory of how these apes got on the mountain. But in their research, they found that the Native Americans who actually lived there were the ones who named that Monkey Mountain, because they used to see monkeys on the mountain when they were, on that land. It was a very Native
right,
American established area. And this land is huge. I don't know how big Monkey Mountain is, but I do know that there are trails, but the trails are so withered, and because people don't go up there very much. There's a lot of like people do horse riding up there. There's like horse trails. But I've had 2 experiences there. So the first time, I had a photographer friend. We went to high school together, and her and I were like, you know what? We love taking nature photos. We love taking pictures of wildlife. We should go up to Monkey Mountain. Like, that would be a really cool experience. And in hindsight, I know now, like, all the research that I've done, there's been multiple, even on there's like a Bigfoot website database where people can basically turn in their experiences, and they post them for people to see. So whatever city and state in the United States, you can find where people have posted. Obviously, people haven't posted all of them because some people are too scared to come forward, but the people who are brave enough do put their experiences on this website. And I later found that there actually are a lot that are by Monkey Mountain that people, just normal civilians, have had.
right,
So we go out there, and there's 2 entrances. The main entrance is like a park, like kind of like it's got like soccer field and playgrounds,
mhm,
and a lot of people who do the horse trail, they go out there and park, and it's kind of like a more like a commercial type area, community type area. And then the
right,
second entrance is on a back road, kind of out of town, that you can get to, and that's where a lot of kids go to, maybe drink or do things that they probably shouldn't. But it's a back access area that a lot of
right,
people don't know about. And so we went that way, and I just remember it was in season of summer, or early fall, so everything was green. There's lots of trees, so really hard to see through all of the, you know, the brush and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
it was very lush out there basically. And so we go out there and we get to this certain little spot, and it wasn't very far into the trail. You kind of have to walk a little bit of a ways up, a little bit up a hill and kind of down a pathway before you get into like all the
Mm-hmm.
trees where it's
Yeah.
covered. And we get out there, and I've had this experience with another person where you know the vibe and you don't even have to speak to each other. You just
Yeah.
kind of know instinctively that this is not where we should be. We're very unwelcome. We don't know how to describe that, but we both felt it, and we both knew that we were being watched. And it was very strange because there was this picnic table that was made out of wood, and
Mm-hmm.
it was broken. The seat part of the wooden part of the bench was broken. Like it looked like someone had just taken their hand and just like smashed it like a karate chopping a board almost. That's how I would describe
Oh
it.
wow.
And I thought it was very interesting and strange. But
Yeah.
then she had set her sunglasses down on this bench, and I said, "Oh, wouldn't that be a really cool picture?" I said, "You get in one side of the lens and I'm going to get on the other side of the lens, and we're going to take a picture of us inside these glasses, and it's going to look like someone's watching us from their view, but it's us in their view, you know, it's us with our cameras."
Right.
And I just remember taking that picture and like looking back on it now and the experience that we had. That's how I was feeling in the moment. And I captured that without even realizing that I was capturing it. I'll have to send you that picture because
Yeah,
it's a
please
really
do.
cool
Yeah, I was
picture.
like, yeah, I
But
really wanted to see it.
it's like kind of hard to imagine it as I'm describing it, but we just both distinctively said, without even saying it, I think it's time to go. Like, we don't need to be here. We don't need to actually go any further. I think we're done. And we left, and I remember thinking I wanted to reach out to her, but then at the same time I said, I don't know if she wants to talk about it. You know, I think she felt uncomfortable. I know I was uncomfortable, but at the same time I was glad I got to experience it, because I've had another similar experience, and I haven't told many people this at all. I think my friend Robert's like one of the only people that really knows about this, but maybe another person. But I was exploring some abandoned houses, and I stumbled across one. I had this suitcase that would have props in it and my camera and stuff, and I know exploring alone is very dangerous, and I've been in experiences where I thought if that would have went a little bit differently, I don't know if I would be here. And definitely, if you're going to be exploring anything, always be safe, and always try to get permission from property owners, because even though it looks
Right.
abandoned, someone can still own it. So that's a big thing that me and my friend Robert, he prides in for sure. And I love that about him, because he's such a researcher and finding really cool places for us to explore. But so I'm at this house, and it's just wide open. I mean, the door to the basement is just open. Like, it's open. I've experienced that in many abandoned homes where you can literally just walk in there. You're not breaking in, entering, you're just literally walking in, because either the city hasn't asked them to board it up, or whatever it may be. So I walk in there, and it's clearly not been taken care of. It is clearly a mess. One of the most terrifying experiences of my life. So okay, so I get up on the first floor, set my suitcase down, got my camera, and I'm just kind of looking around, just observing my environment. And the first thing I notice is that there's a sheet covering this doorway. Almost, it was very wide doorway. So like, imagine a sheet, you know, open all the way, and hanging up, covering kind of like an entryway to a living room, if you will. And I could tell there was a really cool window at the top, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to get up there, you know,
Right.
where the house was. You know, it was my first time in there, so I didn't know the layout, but I knew that I had to go through whatever the sheet was in this walkway to get to the living room to hopefully get to stairs to get up to the upstairs. I got the courage to open up the sheet. And as I pulled the sheet back, it's nothing but pure darkness, complete pitch black.
Oh dear Lord.
And I think to myself, okay, there's something behind here, and I could feel it. Like I said, that whole like predator moment where you're being watched and they're hunting you and they can see you, but you can't see them. My heart is literally like beating out of my chest. And I just have this like, holy smokes, like something does not want me in here and I need to get out. I immediately said, I am so sorry that I am in here and I am leaving. Like I made myself announce. I said, I'm sorry, whoever you are, I'm going to go. And so I grabbed my suitcase, I grabbed my camera, and I literally ran out of there faster than I ever have. And I've been in some situations where it's been really creepy or feel like there's spiritual type stuff.
Right.
And it's not scared me like that. So I go out, I jump this fence, and where I had parked was across the street from this house. And it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. There's some houses kind of here and there, but it was in this kind of rural area of the town that I was in. And this lady drives by and I go over. There was like this kind of dilapidated barnish thing across the street from this house and where I parked. And so I'm down in there and I was just trying to kind of like recover. And like I was taking pictures. I had this mannequin and this shirt that I had for this this brand that I had. But I was taking pictures and this lady drives by and she said, hey, are you in that house? And I pop up and I said, huh? I said, lady, I'm over here. And she was like, oh, good. I thought you were in my neighbor's house. And I said, somebody lives there? And she said, yeah, my neighbor lives there. I said, ma'am, someone lives in that house? And she said, yeah, why? And I said, nothing. And I just kind of turned around and walked away. And I was just like so taken back.
Lord.
And then I'm like, okay, well, who lives there? And what are they keeping in that house? Because whatever was in that house probably was not a human.
Yeah, so that's what I was about to ask you. So
terrified.
like, what do you think was that? Like,
That was my thing. It was almost like, it's funny because there's different, like I love the Mothman story. That's one of my favorite legends. And it kind of almost felt like that. Like I felt like, have you ever seen Jeepers Creepers?
No, I'm
It's
not
okay if
so
you haven't. It's an old horror movie, but
okay.
it's a very similar. It's almost like you take Mothman, but you made him into not a good person.
Oh dear Lord.
Basically, what happens is there's like an entity who when he needs to re-health himself, he basically has to consume humans to regrow back parts, if that makes sense. So he's very terrifying. He has wings. He's this, and all I could think of was, what if there was somebody that was like living there? Yes, and maybe these people have this perception of what this person is, but it was almost like I had walked into whatever it was that they were, and they didn't want me to know what they were, and they hid. And I felt like that whole room and the whole part of that house was dark for a specific reason. And if you could have seen the inside of this house, you would understand why I did not think someone was living there, because everything in that place was beyond disgusting, beyond a big mess, if that makes sense.
Right.
Abandoned boats and cars in behind their house. Like it was a what I would call a traditional abandoned gemstone. And it ended up being probably one of the most terrifying experiences. And like I said, you can listen to stories about people who have Sasquatch experiences or who have ghost encounters, and it's hard for those people to understand that or to think that's maybe real, because a lot of people it's you got to see it to believe it, kind of thing. And so they might look at you like you're crazy, but I know what I have experienced, and I've experienced many type of things, spiritual type attachments, not so good ones,
Right.
that I think I have gathered from traveling to different places. I mean, me and my friend have rented out the Missouri State Penitentiary twice, for photographic experience and just for the experience of being there. It's not an operating prison, but it is the original prison, that was built, for the Missouri State, and it's a very interesting experience. We take lots of props and
Yeah,
take some pretty crazy pictures.
because I was
But
about to say, yeah, you can dress up like Batman, and that would be perfect, for the character.
we have so much fun. I mean, when we went there the first time, what happens is you each person who goes, individually pays like $80. You get to go
Mhm.
there for the whole day. You get like 8 hours. You get there, and it's neat because the people who are giving you the tours are like ex wardens or ex guards from the prison.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So they have like personal experiences, with the living and with the dead,
Oh dear
that they
Lord.
share with you, and it's a very cool experience.
Great.
But take the pictures that I've taken are very, very definitely dear to my heart. But going there and experiencing that type, like that's why we went to the Glore Psychiatric Museum today, because just experiencing things is what we all should be doing, and learning and
Absolutely.
educating
Yeah.
ourselves
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
using all of our senses to do that. Like it was a cool experience, and so I that's what I strive to do a lot, is we try to make experiences and try to document it on the way. We take some pretty cool pictures at these places that we go to that most people have forgotten about, and might be demolished one day, and my pictures might be the only thing that's left of history that people will forget. So
Great. Absolutely. Yeah. Like when I went to Michigan, one thing that I did was to take like just videos of like just the streets as I'm walking by, and I've yet to upload them. Like I'm gonna do it like on a separate channel or something. But it's 100 years from now, it's gonna be like one of those videos that we see of New York like 100 years ago.
I love those. And when they put them in color, like now they're starting to put
Yeah.
videos in color, and
Yeah.
I love that. Those people are just like waving, and they're so happy
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
like, we're on camera.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like when I was taking the videos, and a couple kids were asking me like, "Oh, is it going to be on YouTube?" Like it's recorded. And for me it's
Aw.
like, yeah, and it's like when you see it, years down the line, you get to see it, like, you get to, it's like a window that you are peeking into about how
Right.
life was like back then. And you might not realize it now, but like even 10 years from now, it'll be a trip, a nostalgic trip for you. And so I wanted to do it. So that's something that I'm planning on doing, like like as a hobby of sorts, wherever I go. But even in my home country as well, because I do like documenting stuff, and I think like documentation is so important, especially now we have the technology. Like it's so crazy like how much data we can store on, like, even the smallest of devices. Like it's crazy. So it would be almost a crime not to document stuff, I would say, at this point. Because it's just like, again, like it comes back to that perspective thing that I spoke of. Like, we can never get enough of perspectives about a
I
certain.
totally agree.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I think it's really great that you love documenting and stuff, because I think that's a good habit as well. And not just like taking pictures for like Instagram's sake or something, but just like even journaling, like those mummy adventure movies, or those like Uncharted games, or I'm not sure if you have played those before, but like those adventure type of movies where like they journal stuff, and they have like this brown leather book of sorts, and they pen down stuff like Indiana Jones style. Like I think those are always great, because like it just is like it gives you a perspective, a window into like what the explorers were looking into. And earlier you mentioned the Sphinx being like covered, like till like the up till the head or something with sand. I think
Yeah.
explorers like sketched it out when they first went there. Like when Napoleon went there, for example, they I think they painted the whole scene as well. So and I think like that there's just something about like documentation. We might not realize it like when we are doing it, but when we look back at it later, it's just one of the most invaluable pieces of articles that we have to understand and to relive those memories essentially.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. There's a good example of like talking like you were talking about journaling and these people, that's what they, even just like a couple 100 200 years ago, people were journaling and writing every day about their experiences and there's actually two examples, but one of them is the gentleman we were talking about earlier, Graham Hancock. He was researching his great grandfather's diaries, I think,
Yeah.
and he had been to the top of the pyramid, and at the top of the
Yeah.
pyramid, do you know this story about his
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
grandfather?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. I mean, how cool is that to know that his grandfather also climbed the Great Pyramid? I think it was in during a war. But he was over there and he writes his name at the top of this pyramid, and then his grandson climbs the same pyramid and finds his name, like, and then he reads about it in his journal and knows that he climbed to the top of the pyramid on a certain date. I just think that's amazing that you know not losing that history of his life and feeling like he did the same thing that his great grandfather did.
Yeah,
He
like
explored.
absolutely. I mean, if it wasn't for the documentation aspect of it, like, he wouldn't have known. And that's one thing I love, like, understanding, like, the world of, like, my grandparents, like, what kind of world did they live in and where did they come from and stuff. And I love exploring stuff like that. Like, with my grandfather, like, because he was born in 1919, I don't know much about him. Like, he passed away when my dad was really young, and I wish I knew. But like, even the few photographs that I have of him, I treasure them. Like,
Right.
yeah.
Yes.
But because I'm like, those are pieces of history is one thing, but I wish I knew more because I wanted to see, okay, what parts of, like, the world that did he travel to. He probably did like stay in India, but like, even then, like, the India that he knew is so different because, like, India back then also consisted of like Bangladesh and Pakistan. Like, it was both countries, like, those are three separate countries right now, for example.
Right.
And
Yeah.
India was still under British rule back in the day.
That's
So
so
I'm like,
crazy.
yeah. And it's like, I want to see his world. Like, I want to see, like, what was life like, and what kind of documentations did he have to carry, IDs wise, or how did all those types of things pan out. And yeah, like, I think, like, if like he had documented those things, like, I would have like known about it, but I don't. So that's why I wanted the typewriters earlier as well. Like, I really wanted to start typing stuff out, because my handwriting is all over the place. So I was like, I have to type, like a journal of sorts.
That's the greatest idea, and I feel like I want to do that too because
Yeah.
I feel my handwriting. I feel like our generation with the calligraphy, no one's writing, everyone's typing or on their phone. So my hand strength of writing, if I write for a long time, my hand hurts, and I feel like that's so funny. But I would probably have to build strength to do the typewriter too. But it just seems so funny that how different our
Yeah.
just how we document things is. And I love that you want to keep it vintage because that's how it should be.
Oh yeah,
That's how
yeah,
it is
yeah.
in my world, at least.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is what happens when you watch too much Batman, um but I think, like, and there's that old time charm as well that comes with, like, with a typewriter and everything. But I always think, like, okay, you have to do it in a soundproof room, because otherwise, people would get really annoyed at all the clicking sounds, all the time.
Oh,
But
that's funny. I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
yeah, because I'm so sensitive to, like, the sounds and everything, but and I try to be considerate, like, and this is why, like, having like an own living space or like your own office room of sorts however small it might be, is still like so valuable because you get to do whatever you want in it. um and yeah, like I love typing things out that way, and I think like having a typewriter, like, and just keeping like a files of sorts, it's just going to be fun for sure. I'm going to enjoy that process. But yeah, like I'm looking forward to it. And you can also get the ones with like the red ribbons and the black ones as well. So you can also like that way type out like certain words in red or something, just in case if you want to highlight those words or something. You can
Oh,
always
that's
do that.
cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There are cool. Like there are people who draw with typewriters. There's a guy who does it. It's so crazy. Like he will. I don't know how he does it, but like he will type out certain letters, and then he would use the same paper and then like type another character or something, and then he'll create paintings of sorts as well.
Oh
So
my gosh, it's because he can
yeah,
access a part of his brain that we cannot.
yeah,
That's
probably.
definitely what that man's doing.
It's so crazy, like the stuff that people do with like typewriters and stuff. But it's so crazy, like right now it looks like this, like vintage stuff, but at one point that's what people used to type.
Yes, that was their normal because that's what they had. That's all they knew.
That is so crazy. Yeah,
Like,
like
could you imagine your grandpa or even your great grandpa coming into the future to see what we're doing? Like, how would they even? They would probably be pretty blown away.
it would melt their brains, like
I know. I
um
mean, there's people who come out of prison who've been in there for a long time, and I know that they have these. I've heard of these programs, so they're using like virtual reality headsets, and they bring them into prisons for people who are transitioning out, so who are going to be leaving soon and like done with
mm,
their sentence.
right,
And they use this to show people who've been in there for a very long time how society has changed. So they put on these virtual reality sets, and they'll go to a laundromat and do laundry. They'll experience what it's like to have a phone, be in a grocery store doing self checkout, because when they were going to the store, in the
no way.
80s, it was completely different. So to them, they would have to learn how to basically reestablish themselves in society. And I
Right.
thought that was very interesting that they were using virtual reality to show people basically what the world looks like. Like that was kind of cool, honestly.
It is like virtual reality has like this effect of like essentially getting us used to something because the mind is unable to pretty much like tell the difference. It's the same reason why like in the manifestation world, like why visualizing works, because the mind is always unable to differentiate like what's quote unquote real and what's in the mind and what you might be seeing on a screen. And that's
That's
why
terrifying.
that's why you would feel like the emotions when you see a certain horror movie, for example. Like the mind is unable to differentiate it. Like intellectually we know, but like on some level in the mind it's all the same. And that's why you have to be very careful as to why you should only watch movies that are like somewhat on the positive end of the spectrum for the most part, like just so because the mind is unable to say the difference, and in order to just regulate your nervous system, yeah, it's better to be on the good side of things in general. Yeah,
I totally agree. Yeah.
but it's so crazy, like how you can be isolated from society, and you know you can just get lost, even in a couple years, for example. Like it's so crazy like how that can happen. I know that because like I've experienced it. Like I left India in 2004, but if I were to go back now, like that place is unrecognizable. Like I've been there a couple times, like since it's not like I've never been there or something, but you can see the differences. Like it's so crazy, like some streets would completely change, or certain ways of paying does not even work anymore. And it's so crazy how that works. Like
Wow.
and so yeah, like I
I
love the
was
idea of
very
having a
curious
VR.
earlier
Yeah.
to know how often you did visit or if you had family that still lived there.
Okay, so I do have family there, but like I'm not like in communication with them also. It's like really like my dad and my mom handles it, because this is the thing, like I have such a gap with these people, like in terms of
Yeah.
I mean, I can interact with them. Like, I know more people than like my sister. My sister is completely like unaware of like, like stuff. Like, she's like an airhead that way. Like, she wouldn't like know, like recognize any relative or something like that. So like she wouldn't know, for example, like an uncle or a relative or something. She will just ask me like, oh, who is this or who is that, but for me it's like I recognize them. But the thing is that there's not much common ground. Even the kids who are like my generation, like, we don't have much in common. Like,
Yeah,
it's so
I can see
crazy.
that. What
Yeah.
you, yeah.
Their world is so different than mine. Their priorities, the things that they are into, is so different than mine. I try to communicate, and we do talk, but it's like on a very superficial level, I would say.
Yeah,
um,
I was literally just about to say it's not on a deep level, like you still have a connection, but your experiences and your life are very different than how they experience things. So connecting on a deeper level with different generations can be hard. Like my granny is so funny. Whenever we went over to her house, her daughter's older than my mom. It's her the oldest daughter of the three girls, but she's really into weird stuff like me. And when we went over there, my youngest son was talking about Sasquatch, and my granny goes, "Oh, well, I got a magnet for you." And I said, "You have a magnet for me?" She's like, "Yeah, Tammy got this for me in the North Pacific, and I hear there's lots of Sasquatch out there." And I was just like, "Wow, look at my granny supporting my weirdness." And it was this like great moment of like you said, like the generation gaps, and I felt like, oh my gosh, my granny, like, she understands me and she accepts my weirdness, and a lot of people don't get to experience that. And it
yes.
felt good because she thought it was funny, and I had asked her, if she had ever had experiences when her and my grandpa lived down in Warsaw, and she told a funny story about how my grandpa had scared my younger cousin. He told him, to look out for that red-eyed monster in the woods. And I told her, I said, why do you think grandpa said that? And she said, I think he was just trying to, scare Jake and just be funny. And I said, but do you know that's a very common description, that when people see Sasquatch, sometimes they almost describe it as if their eyes fill with blood, because the red that their
Yes.
eyes can turn almost like it's like they're like a snake, like a rattlesnake. They're shaking their rattle. They're showing you, hey, please back up. We don't need to interact. And that's how they change their eyes. And I almost said to my granny, what if my grandpa, who wasn't a very open person, what if he did have an experience? What if he did see, a red-eyed monster? And in a jokingly way, I thought, he would be kind of ornery like that, but I feel like he wouldn't have said something like that just out of nowhere. Like, I felt like, what if my grandpa did have an experience, and in a way he was almost like warning Jake, like, make sure you look out for the big, red-eyed monster, because you don't want it to get you. And in a way he was being funny, but at the same time I feel like a message can be interpreted differently, and that's kind of how I took it. I kind of took it as, he was warning my younger cousin in a way, but at the same time he was trying to be
Right.
funny. But who's to say? Sadly, my grandpa, he passed away in 2020, but I wish that he was here so I could just say, did you actually see one, or were you just trying to scare Jake? Because I
Yeah.
need to know.
No, it's crazy. Sometimes they like, I think older folks like tend to kind of speak in almost like riddles, because they don't want
Yes.
to say the exact thing. Like, I've heard stories where like war veterans, when they come back, like they wouldn't say a thing um to their kids or their grandkids. And then there was this one guy, I think he was like a Delta Force operator or something, and one of the reasons why he joined was because of his grandfather. Like, it was so funny. He described it like how his grandfather didn't say a single word to anyone, and then like towards the old, like the tail end of his life, when this guy was around, he just started talking wartime stories all of a sudden, like for some reason. And this guy goes like, as a kid, he's like, holy shit, like, this, my grandfather's like telling me all this stuff, and like nobody's here to like listen to these things except me.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
And yeah, like, and I think like certain people do open up later in their lives and in their deathbeds and stuff. And that's why, again, like, coming back, like, documentation is important, because what if there's that one curious grandkid who wants to go out there and explore all these things, who wants to go out there and see all these things, like, do it for them, if not for you, do it for those kids. Yeah.
Yes, that's how I feel I am. And it's funny because I wonder if, what my grandkids will think of me one day. Am I going to be, the crazy grandma who, believed in Sasquatch and aliens, and she was right all along. I
Mhm.
think about that and all the things that I'm saving or, sharing with my kids, and that the stories that they're going to pass down, because that's always been a part of civilization and people is like you said, documentation, art, telling stories, and keeping those stories around for generations. And I feel like a lot of our stories that we have nowadays have been very altered, and watered down, or changed in some ways, and we need to get those old stories back. I think it would be good for everyone, because like I said, it could be devastating for some people, but in a way, what if finding out the truth and seeing the true documentation of where we come from, what if that helps all the generations that come forward? What if what we're doing now about the UFO revolution, and what Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp are doing? I mean, we're literally in the midst of a revolution, and full disclosure is truth and transparency. And will we ever see that? I don't know. I would love to think that we would, but like you said, it makes you question everything, and I question a lot of things. I mean, there's been things that I've read about. One particular thing that really kind of keeps me thinking is, there's been a couple governments that have admitted to faking alien abductions on people. And I was just telling my friend this today. There's people who have experiences that are very traumatic with said abductee experiences, and
Yes.
those people go through those, and it made me think, okay, so there's another lady, and she did this research. She's at a college, and she does this research, and she finds out that abductees, alien abductees, when they're recalling their experiences, they have the exact same physical responses as a person who is retelling war trauma, okay, or a victim of like SA, you know.
Mm.
So they they're finding this. They did all this research and all these people, and every single one of them, had the same. They're sweating, their heart rate's elevated, they're reliving this experience, and it's very traumatic. But what she said, but that wasn't the interesting part. She said what was the most interesting was, what I found is that when I asked them, what was your most traumatic experience, I also asked them, what was your most pleasurable experience, or your most enjoyable experience that you've ever had. So she kind of makes them go on this, like, one spectrum to the other.
Great.
And the abductees, when they answered, they said, well, the worst experience I had was the abduction, but it was also my most pleasant experience. And it was actually very spiritual, and it was life changing, and it changed my whole perspective on how I see the world. And that
Mm.
even though I'm so small and I'm on this rock, it's so much bigger than us, is basically how she described it. And she said, you will never, ever hear that from a war veteran. You will never hear that going to
Mm.
war was my worst experience, and going to war was also my most pleasant experience. She said, what she
Yeah.
found was that these people were very believable, and that what they were experiencing, she felt was very real. And it made me think when I heard that person say that, you know, governments have admitted to falsifying alien abductions to scare people. I thought, okay, what if the ones where the people have the most pleasant experience, and obviously it was probably traumatic, because that would be traumatic, but it was also in their most pleasant experience. What if those experiences are actually from, you know, said real entities? And what if the ones where people are having traumatic experiences are from the government? And that really got my
Right.
brain ticking, because it was like, these poor people are having these horrible experiences, and they're scared, but then you also have these other people who are having the most spiritual moment of their life. And how do you explain that? I mean, you could say maybe there's different races or species of aliens, and I could see
Mhm.
that theory as well, but that one really made me think. I was like, wow, like, how does that come to be where these people are not having a good experience and it is very traumatic, but these people also experience the same thing but very differently, and
Yeah.
also came out with it positively? Like,
Right.
that really got me thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to actually like talk about is like the dilution of like these phenomenons because of human beings in general. Like for example, you know, UFOs, right? Like there are the actual probably alien spacecrafts and everything, and then there are, you know, like experimental aircrafts that like other countries have, you know, that also kind of fall into that umbrella when like people are, you know, seeing it from the ground, I guess. And like it kind of dilutes the UFO phenomenon in the sense that like you're not just talking about alien spacecrafts, you also you could be talking about like, you know, classified aircrafts as well. You know, and so there's that aspect to it. And even like UFO videos or any alien videos, the, you know, the internet is always like always dishing out a few, but it's like, you know, how many of those are real and how many of those are like, you know, fake.
Yeah.
And especially now it's so easy, you know, with AI generation and everything, it's like it's that much more prevalent probably. Like and you know, it's one of the, I guess one of the reasons why folks are not able to get into this you know, space of like conspiracy and like just make the exploration as a whole is because of that dilution, you know. Like they can't
Yeah.
separate the so-called the good ones from the bad ones, I guess. And it's just like maybe they're purposely doing it as well, you know. Even that could be a thing where they are like, you know, just populating the internet with like, you know, spam content to the point where you're unable to distinguish which is which.
Yes, I
That
completely agree.
which kind of deters people from the whole experience. Yeah.
But what really blows my mind is like all these whistleblowers that are in the military that have come forward, that have
Mhm.
testified.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of people don't know this if they're not into, you know, I feel like I think Jeremy Corbell said it. He was like, once you get like the alien, like, I don't think he called it, I can't remember what he called it, but it's basically like catching a, you know, like a virus or something. Like once you get it, like, you're either in it or you're not in it. And when you're in it, you know, you dive into it, and there's just so much information out there, and you know, these people testify and they tell these stories, but there's stuff out there, but it's only half. So like the Tic Tac video that's out there that they've shown that these people have, you know, have testified to and have told Congress about, there they've described that there's like 20 maybe 30 plus more minutes of that video that we will never see, of this craft apparently descending into the water, um and
Right.
going down there for a very long time before coming back up, and you know, descending into the sky. But there was also another video, and I can't remember which one it was, but there was two, you know, pilots who are flying, and they zero in on this, you know, this craft, and you can hear them in the audio because there's multiple screens, I think, that they're looking at, but the screen you're looking at is just them kind of like zeroing in on this craft, but you can hear the gentleman say there's a whole fleet of them, and it was like a triangle formation of, I think they said like 20
Oh
20
wow.
crafts. But Jeremy Corbell's like, you will never see that footage, and you'll never see the footage of it going into the ocean either. They're gonna disclose it, but they're gonna disclose it at a limit. You know what I mean? Like, they're not
Right.
gonna give us
It's
all
always
the
going to be
things.
covered with black ink, like whatever they release. Yeah.
Correct. Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a great
Yeah.
example to say. Yes. But there's so much stuff out there, and Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, they have to be very careful with their whistleblowers, and checking and researching and making sure that these people are legit, and that they are um, you know getting the information out when they can, because
Right.
there's things that they can't even talk about, because they could get prison time or fine for just speaking about it, which is crazy that we have freedom of speech here, but we can't talk about things that nobody even knows. Nobody even knows what's going on, and we can't even talk
You have
about it.
freedom
So
of
it's like,
speech. Yeah. It's an illusion. It's an illusion that like there's freedom. Yeah, you
yes.
have freedom of speech, yes, but you can only talk about the rainbow flags and all that stuff. Yeah, the big thumbs up there, but yeah, aliens, conspiracy stuff. No, no, no. But Jeremy Corbell, I think like he really does his due diligence, because I know that because he always appears with like Bob Lazar in a lot of shows.
Oh, yes. I
Um,
love Bob Lazar's
yeah,
story. That's a good one.
like I was really hoping to bump into him in Michigan. But my friend was like, "You're never gonna see him." Like I've been in Michigan my whole life. Like I've never seen Bob Lazar. Like I'm like, oh damn,
Do you want to know the coolest thing that happened to me the other week?
Yeah, please.
I was on Instagram, and like I told you, that video went viral. And so like my notifications, like every day, it's just like, it'll say like 2 seconds ago, 3 seconds ago. And so I check it every once in a while, and I happened to go and check it, and someone started following me, and I could not even, my jaw went to the floor. It was George Knapp. George Knapp started following me on Instagram, and I was so honored that he even liked one of my photos that I took at the Missouri State Penitentiary. But then when I sent him the video, the viral video that I had, that was uh, from their documentary that they put out, and he liked that too. I could not even believe, like, that to me was like a moment, because reading his book that he wrote, there was another author that helped with the writing of it, but it's called The Hunt for the Skinwalker, and it's about a remote ranch in Utah that is one of the most uh, documented and researched paranormal spots in the world. Um, think Rob Bigelow, that gentleman helped fund tremendous research with scientists that they hired with money that they came up with. And there was a family who lived on the ranch, and they experienced things. They were cattle. That was their job, was cattle for the ranch, and they were basically scared off the land. And the gentleman who owned the ranch, he actually went back after they had moved out. He had went back and helped Rob Bigelow and George Knapp and
Right.
a few other people to investigate it. And he even said that stuff followed them where they went, like where they moved, that whatever that was that they experienced, that was always 2 steps ahead of them, followed them. Like, it didn't just stay on the property. And that's what George Knapp like really tried to express to people, was like, whatever this rip in time fabric that we have going on in this area is far beyond just this land. Like, it travels, it can go places, it is very intelligent, it knows what you're thinking before you even think it. He just, and he really inspired me to explore. I mean, he's one of the best investigative journalists of our time, that
Yes.
one day people will look back and go, wow, he was really ahead of his time. And all this research and all these interviews and all this documentation that he did helped us get to where we are now with the UFO revolution. I feel like I look at him and Jeremy Corbell as the Lewis and Clark of UFO phenomenon. And
That's a
I
good way to
think
put it.
they're
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. Like, that is how I look at them, because they're pioneers. they're doing things that no one else wants to do, but people want to know. They want to know about it, but they're not putting in the work. And that's what they encourage you to do. Do your research, ask people. I mean, I ask people all the time. I don't care if you look at me like I'm crazy. Do you think Sasquatch lives out in the woods? I want to know. And and why don't you think that? Like one time I asked, it was actually the president of my company at the time. She's no longer president of the company. There's someone
Right.
else that is now, but I was going around asking everybody, what do you think about Sasquatch? Do you think that Sasquatch is real? And when I asked this particular person this, they laughed so hard, like that laugh where you just like, that they just think that's absolutely absurd. And
Right.
her perception of reality is so much different than mine because of her life experiences. So to her, that's funny because it's like, oh, you're talking about a myth or a legend, and to me, I know she goes on walking trails. I know she walks a lot. She likes to do that to like de-stress. And I said, I asked you this question, right? To get you to think. And I hope maybe one day, maybe you do have an experience. Maybe it's 30 years from now and you're going to think about me and you're going to think, wow, I thought that was so crazy when you asked me that. But because now I've had this experience, I can see life differently. And I think about things like that when I ask people questions. How will this affect them years from now? How did I make them think?
Wow.
Regardless of if they agreed with me or not, or laughed at me because they thought that was crazy. Not necessarily that they maybe think I'm crazy, but the thought of what I think is crazy to them. But it makes me, that's kind of what gets me up every day, is like just knowing that I want to keep exploring, I want to keep asking questions, and I want my children to do the same thing and to continue on not being this cookie cutter of a life and getting up, going to work, and just doing your duties as a citizen. I want my children to also, like I said, Lewis and Clark things, explore, ask questions, go places people don't want to go, find answers, and anything that you find enjoyable. Like that's why I think I'm a secluded person for the most part, because things that I'm interested in or that I want to talk about are not things that most people want to talk about. Not mainstream people
Right.
who go home and watch CSI or Nancy, any kind of mainstream show. Like I could
Right. Right.
never
Right.
watch mainstream channel shows. Like it would be the equivalent of Wednesday Addams in the movie The Addams Family,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
she's at the camp and they want to desensitize her and make her like everyone else, and they put her in that cabin with those kids and make her watch all those Disney movies. Like that's how I feel when I'm watching TV with people, when they're watching The Masked Singer or just some weird show that I'm like, I cannot even vibe with this
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. 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 I have the same kind of thing as well, but like that's one of the great reasons why like I think the internet is amazing, is because we get to connect with like our own tribe of people.
Yes. I
You
found
know.
more people that I've connected with through photography and through Instagram. That's I
Yeah.
don't like other social media. Instagram's like it's my portfolio, but it's also my way to be a creative artist and to
hmm
I feel like it's like the place where I'm accepted. It's like the community of
Right.
people who can think outside the box and laugh about things at the same time.
Right. Right. And I that's how I started. Like I started Secret of Wisdom, I think when I was like 19, and I'm going to be 25 next month, and it's like it's been like 6 years, and I've connected with people from all around the world. And it's great because you get to really find your own tribe. And I think like one of the again the reasons why I feel like this platform is awesome is because of that, because folks like us, like we might not find common ground with like the people around us, like in our physical space. We might not find common ground that often, and that's why it's really a blessing to find folks across the world, or on the internet. Like you might also find people in your country as well, which has happened to me once or twice. But for the most part, like I think like for me, most of them are on the other side of the world, but still, like, I found it to be a blessing to connect with like just folks, like-minded folks in general. And yeah, like I think this always brings you, like you said, it brought George to your Instagram as well. You really get to connect with your idols in a lot of ways as well, the people that you looked up to. It's much more accessible that way. These people are not out of reach or something. Like back in the day, you might have to write a letter to these people or something like that, but right now you can just ping them on Instagram, and if they
I
respond,
know.
great. Yeah.
Knowing that he read my messages and then went to the video that I sent him and, expressed just like my gratitude of him even
Right.
just, I know a follow is not, it sounds kind of silly that I'm saying this now, but to me, I like the way I described it to someone. I'm like, okay, imagine like your favorite movie or singer. Like
Mhm.
that's what that was equivalent to me, was like someone who has inspired me
Mhm.
tremendously, and he has no idea like the effect that he has had on my life since I found that book
Right.
and that
Right.
documentary that Jeremy Corbell came out with. And I think his was called Hunt for the Skinwalker too, and it was on Hulu. And that was such a great documentary. The book's always better, in my opinion. Movies are great too, but you can't always
Yeah.
get all the things you want. Even in documentaries, it can be hard. But I was just so inspired and so I had been manifesting that. I was like, I want to meet Jeremy Corbell. I want to meet George Knapp. I want them to see, how they've inspired me to spread this very interesting information that people don't even know is out there. I mean,
Right.
half the people in America don't even know that they are having to disclose information about UAPs, and that they call it UAPs now, not UFOs.
Yes.
They're confusing people, and that's very funny because you're trying to slow it down, and that's wonderful for you. But
Is it
we
unknown aerial phenomenons at this point? What does the U stand for? I forgot about.
so yes, it's uh the what is, you aerial phenomenon. It's, oh my gosh, now I can't even remember at this moment, but
Let me look it
yeah,
up
it's
real
because
quick.
unidentified aerial phenomenon. That's
Unidentified.
what it
Okay,
is.
got it.
That's
Got
what
it.
it is.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
because basically what they have stated, which I found um, a very old movie. That's what I was going to tell you earlier. I've been on Tubi and I've been finding old movies, and after the Roswell crash, like in the 40s,
Yeah.
in the early 50s, the first feature film for an alien movie, I think it was 1953, was it when it was made, or it might have been sooner than that. But I'm watching it and I'm watching all these old alien movies that were made, like really cool. Like
Mhm.
I have them all saved, but I definitely send you a few. But one of them, it was talking about how like a certain percentage in the sky is unidentified, and this is in the 50s, and this is stuff that people are saying now. Like it was
Right.
like almost exact carbon copy of what this documentary said in the movie. But I was just like kind of blown away because it was like, okay, it's been how many years since then, and we're still in the same exact spot? How does that even make sense? And all the things that they're putting in this movie were so, like we were talking about earlier, like how I said, I feel like entertainment was a preparation to see how people would react to certain
Right. Right. Right.
situations of reality. And in this one, I can't remember what it was called, but this spacecraft lands, and basically this guy makes like a doppelganger of one of the guys, and he's walking around and he's very unnatural, just very unnatural, and he's
Right.
talking to these two people who know the guy, and they're just kind of like, it's off, it's weird, and he basically describes like, we can take form of whatever we want whenever we want, and he just kept saying, don't be afraid, just don't be afraid. And it was so eerie, but it was like I'm watching all this and I'm thinking, all these things are things that people are talking about now, but they were talking about that in the 50s. Like they were literally putting this stuff, allowing people to put this stuff on film and put that out there. But to them, at people at that time, that was crazy. Like, you're crazy if you think that's real, and that's absolutely sci-fi, nutsos. And I'm sure people laughed at that stuff, but now when I look back at it, I'm like, they were really trying to send a message, and in a way that people didn't even know. Like, they were almost kind of telling
Absolutely.
them, like, this is how they work. um do you think this is okay? And I feel like they felt like, no, people would not think this was okay because maybe how they reacted to it. But I don't even think people know that those films, I didn't even know those films
I didn't
existed
know they
until I
existed.
found them.
Yeah, like until you told me about it, and
Like, one
I'm
of
just blown
them,
away.
when I
Yeah.
clicked on it, it says first ever feature film featured alien, like it says something to that effect, but it was the
Right.
first ever released like alien film, and then there was several after that. But they're really good and interesting, and I've had a really good time watching them because it's just, like you said, perspective, and seeing all of them. And it's interesting to see the perspective of how people made movies about them that in that time, and where we've gone advancing with, like you said, Star Trek, and just Star Wars. All of those things were inspired by those things as well, or the Twilight Zone.
Hmm.
That was a huge, I'm sure, inspiration for a lot of people
Right.
who were into stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, like it's interesting that you brought like how people from a certain time period might perceive aliens. I often think about like, oh, the painting from, like, I think it was Leonardo da Vinci was the one who painted this. It was a painting of Mother Mary, I believe, but in the
The
background,
spacecraft in the background.
yes, yes,
Yes,
that's the
I know
one.
exactly.
Yeah,
Me
yeah,
and you are so alike. It's not even funny. Like, the rabbit holes I go down. I like I said, I research everything, and that's one of my favorite. I love that photo. Like, I
yeah.
I wish I had that painting in my house.
Yeah, like it's so crazy because like I'm into art, like, I do paintings all the time, like digital art and stuff. And like one thing that they always point out was like, oh, oh, it might be like just a blemish in the painting or something, but no, there's a shepherd
It was
in the corner.
deliberately, yeah.
Yeah, he
Isn't
was
there
looking up.
somebody like almost like observing it, like
Yes.
in the side of the picture,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
There's a
yeah.
person looking up at it, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that's why
Yes.
you can kind of take away the coincidence away
Yes.
from it. It's so crazy. And like you earlier, you spoke about how UFOs come out of the ocean. I think Christopher Columbus had like something written down to that effect when he was making his way to America, in his voyages as well. And again, this is why documentation is so important, because if it wasn't for those things, like, we wouldn't know. Like, from a morality standpoint, wherever you stand with like Christopher Columbus, that's one thing, but I'm so glad that he documented that stuff.
Right.
And
I completely agree.
yeah, like, and I think like, if it wasn't for those types of things, like we wouldn't be able to corroborate or put all the pieces together and get the holistic point of view, like, just get the whole picture, or get inch closer towards that, essentially. Because like one thing that a lot of people they speak about UFOs is that, which really fascinates me, is how they're able to be in any sort of shape, but at the same time they're able to change directions at a whim. And like one thing, I think Bob Lazar was the one who spoke of it in Joe Rogan show. He was speaking about how we have the physics, but we don't have the technology to fabricate the materials, or we don't have the technology to create that kind of aircrafts. Because I'm into aviation, so like I'm always looking into like the new military tech and everything like that. And I always like, ever since I knew about the UFOs, I'm like, this is primitive stuff. Like that's what it looks like to me, because the thing is, yeah, UFOs can do so much more than like what even the latest F-35 can do, for example. It's always crazy, to think about the technology that these people have access to, and like how much of it is human based,
Or that
that
we've
we
been
don't know.
trying to re-engineer it
Yeah, yeah,
for
yeah,
so
exactly.
long.
Absolutely, because I know for a fact that like we had to have reverse engineered at least some of it, like, like the printed circuit boards,
Los
for example.
Alamos. I
Yeah,
mean, like
yeah,
we were talking about Bob Lazar. I mean, he knew about an element before it was ever an element.
yeah,
And he
yeah,
was
yeah,
talking about it before
yeah.
anybody knew about it. And
They are still screwing him for that, like even till like, this year, I think, or like till like last year, like they were still like messing with him for it. uh
they did so many things to that poor
yeah,
guy. I mean,
yeah.
But luckily, he's, like I said, he's one of the whistleblowers that have like come out, and he's been through a lot, and I can see why he doesn't want to keep continuing to tell his story. But I'm glad that he does, like you said, for documentation purposes. But there was somebody that had said something that really got me thinking. But it was like, if these species of people or whatever they are, if they're so intelligent, why are they crashing? And I thought about it, and the person they were talking to kind of responded and was like, well, people drive cars every day, people fly planes every day, and
Mhm.
sometimes they crash, but not always do they. And how many cars are on the road that don't, compared
Mhm.
to the ones that do? And that kind of resonated with me a little bit. But then I'd watched another documentary where this gentleman was talking about how right after the first atomic bomb, was set off, that had kind of had messed with, basically, in his perception, he was seeing how he thought that it had basically messed with the environment, and that we had disrupted something. And he thinks that that's why there was so many crashes in that area, because of the atomic bomb. um, and he said that these creatures that came out of the craft, he said one was mangled, but one actually was still alive. And he said that I think it lived until like 1952. That's from the Roswell crash.
Right.
But I thought that was just really interesting, that to think, like I said, the effect that we had on the environment, and how that could affect other dimensions of other people who maybe be able to come in and out of them. um, and what that does to their environment and our environment. It wasn't obviously good for our environment, period. But we don't even know the effects of putting a bomb in the ocean. What's that going to do to the ocean and the ecosystem and all of the life that lives there? Same with on land. But he
Yeah.
kind of in his perception of how he saw it, he kind of put together that he thought, that had something to do with why they were having these issues of crashing, and not being. He said one of them seemed like really upset, like that they were lost, because they probably were. Could you imagine just driving and you get sucked into another dimension and you just crash, and you're just like, oh my God, what is this?
Right.
And
That
there's
that would be
weird
that would be pretty
humans
awful. Yeah,
trying
yeah.
to take you to Los Alamos. Then you got to live in an underground cave for the rest of your, alien life. I
That is
just
so
couldn't
interesting.
imagine.
Yeah. So like what you're saying is like they are not even like traveling within Earth, like they were traveling in another dimension and then they got zapped into this one unknowingly and they crash because of that.
Because, yeah, the effects of like the atomic bomb that
That is
had
so
been off in that
crazy.
area. That was an interesting theory. I thought, well, that's, because he had said it was in the same area. um and then he kind of, was talking just like more about it, and he was just saying how,
Hmm.
the one guy, he got transferred to, and I say guy, but the alien got transferred to a facility somewhere, and then he got transferred to another place. And he said, and then he lived, I think he lived a few more years, like maybe he lived like 5 years after the crash. But they said he died in like the early 50s. But I thought that was very interesting that they had one that was still alive, that I don't even know how you take care of that, or
Yeah, I was like, what do you feed it? Like,
what do you do? Yeah. How do we care for our aliens? It's just,
I
a
can
very
imagine.
like I
Yeah.
said, I'm open to anybody and everybody's, their stories, their experiences, because I've not experienced that. But they've gone through something that has done that. But a lot of the things that Bob Lazar said confirmed so many of these things that he said that have gone on. Um, there's just so much evidence that he has of what he experienced, and
Hmm.
I'm just glad that he got to tell his story, because
Yeah, because yeah, like again, documentation is important. Like Jeremy, I think at one point he spoke about Bob Lazar spoke about this very specific equipment that they use to scan people inside into the facilities. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's
Yes.
like
Yes.
the finger bone scanner or something. Like they measure how the length of your finger bones or something.
Yes. It was very like top security clearance type
Yes. Yeah.
situation. Yes.
Yeah. And Jeremy was like, I didn't believe him until I actually saw that device actually existing. Like that piece of equipment just corroborated Bob Lazar's story
All the
that much
things he
more.
said, yeah. And the
Yeah.
same with that element that he knew about that
Yes. Yes.
came
Yes.
from space that wasn't even an element, until they identified it years later, but he told people about it well before anyone had
Yes.
ever said anything
Yes.
about it.
Yes. I think what
So,
like really adds to his story is like how consistent he's been over the years.
yeah, his story's never changed.
Like if you look at him like in his younger days and like him like talking about this stuff and like right now his story has like been consistent throughout. That has always been like impressive to me because he didn't change it, he didn't go back and forth. And he always like he didn't claim to have even seen an alien. Like he described his experience as he saw it and he left it at that.
Yeah.
So
I think that's probably why he's so tired of telling it, because he just keeps telling you the same thing, and it's like, I've
right.
already told you this a million times, like I'll tell you again, but it's going to be the same thing that I told you last time.
Right. Right.
Yeah, because he said he walked by a room, and I remember one time someone was like, well, did you see a body? And he said, well, what I saw looked like a person that would fit in there, but he said, but for all I know, they could have just had a model, like they were trying to
Mm.
see, how tall the person had to be to fit in the craft. Because when he described the craft that he said, it was like children sized
Yes.
people were driving
Yeah.
the craft. So he thought, well, I just looked in a room for a second or in a window, and could it have been real? Possibly. Could it have been like a decoy type alien that they fit in these crafts to see how tall they were? Could have been that too. But he's never claimed, like you said, he's never said, I saw aliens, or I saw all the bodies. But he was definitely reverse engineering, and they hired him for a reason. I mean, he's a very smart man, and that's why they picked him, because they knew that his brain. And I think I remember him saying he wasn't allowed to talk to his lab partner. They weren't allowed
Yeah.
to have conversations about what they were doing, and he told the people, how are we going to figure this out if we can't work together to figure this out? That makes no sense. Like, this man is helping me on this, but I can't tell him what I'm working on when we're working on the same thing. How does that make sense? Like, that's how classified they were trying to be. Like, you cannot speak to even the person who's
Yeah.
helping you. Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Like and people might think that that is unreasonable or that can't happen, but having been in military myself, like I can say that like it's so easy to compartmentalize. Like I can have my guys like sitting in front of me on an opposite end of a desk and I might not know what they're doing, and vice versa. Like it's so
That's
easy to
so
compartment.
crazy.
Yeah, it's like and I was in HR for context. you know and so extrapolate it,
Yeah.
like how would it be. So it's like I believe that 100%. Like if he had that weird rule where like his superiors told him like you can't do that, you probably couldn't, and it probably hindered the project. But then again, yeah,
It definitely,
I
I
think
mean,
yeah.
he
Yeah.
definitely described that he wasn't able to move forward because he couldn't, no one was conversing with each other with ideas of how we could make this possible.
Yeah,
It's just
because this is
crazy.
the problem with like from their perspective, like the problem is, well, how do we construct a program that is airtight in terms of secrecy, but at the same time we get to get these eggheads to work together. That's a
Right.
hard problem to solve, to be fair. I mean, if you're trying to maintain secrecy in these types of things, unless you keep them like 24/7 on site within the facility itself, it's not possible to keep these people, yeah, like communicating and collaborating basically, because I think from what I understood, like they got to go home every day, if I'm not wrong. Oh,
Yes, yes, yeah. It
and
was
and
like
then I
a
think that's
job.
why, yeah. And I'm really actually shocked that they were able to do that, all things considered. um because like I think if they were like on the site till the project was over or something, I think like it would have been a different story. Yeah.
Like people, when they hear his story and they hear all the things that he says, like yes, that is very crazy, and to some people, just like a real shock.
Hmm.
But what really disturbed me about the story, what really like got me upset, was just the fact that how they basically dissected this man and every bit of work that he ever
Yeah, yeah,
worked
yeah.
for in his life, discredited all of his schooling. I mean, he basically didn't even, they basically made him not exist to try to shut him down. And someone did that. Someone's did that. Someone was a part of trying to, just like they did with the guy, the whistleblower from the UAP Congress hearing. They
Right.
claimed him as that he had PTSD and he was alcoholic, and don't believe this crackpot, basically was what it was. And he has mental illness and trauma, so he's just saying these things. But it's like you can only tear someone down so much before the truth actually comes through, and you realize that they tried to shut these people down, but because their truth and their experience was more powerful than whatever that was, and there was people that supported them, and wanted
Right.
to help them get their word out, because that's how they both felt. They both felt like their lives were on the line and being threatened, to the point that if I don't say something, and I don't say something now, people
Hmm.
I know that I love are going to get hurt, or I'm going to get hurt. And that's really sad that those people feared for their lives, just for something that I feel like is our like our almost in a right to know. It's affecting all of us.
I
And
think cover up happens everywhere at this point.
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt though. Yeah, sorry. Please.
No,
Yeah.
you're
No, no,
okay.
no. Yeah.
I
Uh,
totally agree.
and yeah, because I'm sure you have watched like the maybe I'm not too sure about it, but have you seen the Tucker Carlson's interview with like Vladimir Putin? By any chance?
I don't think I have. No.
Yeah, because like if you were to like follow up that story, like one thing was he was like they tried to like I think they hacked into his phone. They were like trying to just not make the interview happen, you know not get that alternate perspective that the world needs to see at this moment, essentially. So like they do it on so many levels, is what I'm trying to say. Like they do it
Yeah,
to
okay.
like
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
yeah, like the big guys, they do it to journalists. They try everything in their power to control a certain narrative, to the
Yes.
point where like it doesn't just happen with regards to the alien stuff. Like it happens on almost every single level, even like on an institution level these days, where you say something, one thing that is away from the narrative, like the far left agenda at this point, or whatever it is that's going on. You say one thing that like that is out of place, and you get discredited or you get cancelled, as they would call it right now these days.
Right. Yeah.
And which is so crazy, that whole term is like hilarious to me in general. But it's so crazy like how we have to watch like what we say so much. And like censorship is at an all-time high, but in a bad way. It's like I'm sure you're aware of like George Orwell's like 1984, that kind of dystopian reality sort of scenario. And it's like almost coming true, but it's like behind the scenes in a way. um but yeah, like I think ignorance, like is bliss in a way. If you don't know anything, you can just roam around into the world, like we were talking about the Lego guy kind of example earlier as well. You can roam around life like that if you want to. But I think the more like I think I go through the world or something, I can't just ignore stuff. Like, you once you get into the rabbit hole, it's a one-way deal. Like, you will never see the world the same way again. And that's something that you have to live with for the rest of your life. Like, even looking at products on a shelf. Like when I was in the US, that's one thing that was constantly on my mind was I was looking at the flavors that was permitted in the US that's not permitted elsewhere. Like I'm looking at M&Ms for God's sakes, but like that's where my mind goes. You know what I mean? So it's that kind of way that like once you go into this, you're never coming back. And you just want to see like how far does this go, and like how far is the wood rotten to its core, so to speak. But not to say
I
like everything is like doom and gloom, but yeah.
Yeah, I found that the more that I research, it's not the more questions I have answered, it's I have more questions than answers. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's what keeps me going though, is because it's so fascinating and it's intriguing. I feel like history is intriguing, and that's something that, like you said, we've said many times, needs to be preserved. But I feel like we need the truth um, before we can move forward, because what we're living in now is not ideal for our civilization to advance any further, I feel like.
yeah. Yeah, that's one thing. Like one like it's ironic because like we right now have like all these tools and technology, and yet we can't verify a certain piece of information out there. you know um like whatever happens in like Ukraine, for example, like there are so many conflicting stories all the time. Or like it's so easy to create a fake story right now, more so than ever, when we have every single tool to ensure that factual information gets out. And so
Yeah,
like
I
yeah, like and like for me, like I always think, is there a solution to this? Like, is there a world where like only the facts gets out? But I think like technology, even like if you're talking like books, for example, even they, when books were first introduced into the world, like that was controlled by organizations and institutions back then as well, because information is key, like knowledge is power. And I think like that's why it's still being controlled, that's why it's still being like messed with and like just diluted in so many ways. And I think like unless you and I have a time machine where we can go through different eras and like different time periods to see actually what happened, like we wouldn't know the truth. Like I mean, we still don't know who assassinated Kennedy, you know which is
that's
crazy.
one that they bring up tremendously with the whole conspiracy thing with like the UFOs and stuff. It's like that's something that should have been not a mystery, basically.
Mhm.
And what we've been told and what people are now finding out for themselves is not the research that was displayed when a couple years after it happened or whatever may be.
Yeah, yeah.
That's pretty mind-blowing. I do have one thing to share with you about kind of not necessarily similar to that, but there was this explorer a long time ago. Maybe you know this story, but if you don't, it's pretty cool. Can't remember the gentleman's name, but there was this explorer, and where the what is it? It's oh, I'm gonna lose it now. Oh my goodness, it's this big jungle area, and I can't remember what it's called. Maybe it's the Amazon. I can't remember, but
Right.
it's been not explored, and it's very overgrown. And I think it was Graham Hancock that was doing like the radar scanning, like when you go in a helicopter and you like
Mm-hmm.
scan the ground to see what's under like all the trees and stuff.
Hmm.
And they found like all these like the civilization of like millions of people and all these structures and
Right.
whatnot. And this guy had come and visited these people that were there at that time, And he had wrote about it in his journal, you know, that there was these flourishing cities and these millions of people living. I don't want to say it was the Amazon, but maybe it is the Amazon. I think it is. Yeah, it's Amazon rainforest.
Yeah.
And he said whenever people came back about 100 years later to see this story that this man had told everyone, and they were all gone. But what he had said was that like the Spanish settlers or something had came through and given all these people diseases, and all the people died, and the whole entire civilization just went to nothing in like 100 years. And so when these people went back to see this man's story of this great civilization of all these people that lived in the Amazon, they were not there. Everything had grown back over, and they couldn't see anything that this man was talking about, and they thought he was crazy. They were like, that guy just made that story up, and that wasn't a thing. But now they can see that he was telling the truth. Like he really saw, you know, those people living there.
It's so crazy how many stories like that like don't get verified within a person's like own lifetime. Like
Yeah.
their recognition comes like post lifetime, and
After.
it's so tragic. Like when those types of things happens, it's funny when you said that story. Like one thing that came to my mind was like, you know how people prank a group of ants where like they'll put like a piece of candy or something, and then the ant will come and then it'll go to get its like other friends and stuff, but then you remove the candy. So it's like, they all think like, oh, that other end was like lying and stuff, but it wasn't. you know, it's a cruel joke, but like that pretty much like kind of illustrates like how easy it is for things to just disappear, like you say. Within 100 years, like 100 years isn't long, but like a lot of things can happen within 100 years. And that's why,
So
like, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
no, I was just saying, so many things that you say just like really like resonate with me and gets me thinking. You inspire me. I just want you to know that.
Oh, thank you.
The whole ant thing that you just said was just like cool, because it's almost like ants were put here to show us how small we are and how bigger things that we can't even comprehend or understand can affect our environment with.
Absolutely.
And you know, maybe those ant colonies don't always experience people every day, but maybe
Mhm.
one day, like you said, they come and they put a Jolly Rancher on the ground. That's not something they know. That's very confusing, and that would totally disrupt their world that they see as reality. And we're these big huge giants that their brain is just like, probably what? Like I couldn't even imagine being an ant. And like you said, having a piece of candy be there, and you go to tell all your friends, and you come
Yeah.
back and they're like, yeah, okay, Larry,
Yeah.
we've had enough of your
Yeah.
giants that you told us bring you candy.
Yeah. Like it's so crazy like how that can happen. And like honestly, like now that we're on the topic, like they have always fascinated me. Like how they would pour molten metal into abandoned and colonies underground.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that makes me so sad. But yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, like that I know it's sad, but at the same time, like I know that they do it to the abandoned ones. I hope that they do. That's like so cool because when you get to really see the elaborate cave networks, and you're like, how on earth did these things build that? Like that is so crazy. Like I
It
think we
reminds me of that city that Graham Hancock talks about. That's that the civilization, they buried their own city. Do you know about that one?
oh no,
The
no, what
underground
is this?
city. So there's an underground, it was a whole city, and these people built it underground. And Graham Hancock says they can't really understand why they built down or why they were building these tunnels, but they're so sophisticated, like almost like how you're talking about the ants. That was what it looked like. It when they showed you what it looked like underground from the like I told you, they were doing that detection scanning where they could see
Yeah.
underground, and they have this reconstruction video of this underground city, and they had points where like they had ventilation for their fires, so like the smoke would go up a certain hole
Wow.
to get out, so that it wasn't choking everybody out in the community, if that makes sense. Like it
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
so like, and in that time, you know, they were like, these are just hunter-gatherer people. These are, you know, advanced civilizations. And Graham Hancock's like, bullshit. These people built a whole city underground and then they buried it and nobody knows what happened to them. So riddle me
Wow.
that, you know? I was like, holy smokes, that's crazy. Like they did that for a reason, for a purpose. You know, what if it was because, you know, there was a specific animal population that maybe was unsafe for them to be exposed, and maybe they thought if they
Mm.
built a whole city underground they could be safe, you know? It could have been multiple things. It could have been natural disasters, it could have been, you know, uh, a whole list of things. But that, I thought that was very, very neat. And maybe they learned it from the ants. Maybe they thought the ants had the right idea, and that, you know, why are these animals who can be out in this, you know, this world without shelter, you know, to an extent, but, you know, why do they build down? What's the purpose of that, and how can we do that? And thinking about a civilization thinking like that is really intriguing to me.
It really is. It really is. Like, you know, I'm thinking of like other animals who you know kind of like build their own nests and stuff like that. But honestly, none come as like intricate as ants do. I think ants are like, you know, a species of their own. Like they're very intelligent. I don't think like the closest I would say that comes to it are like maybe bees and the wasps.
Oh my
Maybe.
gosh, you just read my mind. That's what I was just about to say. The
Yeah.
How they build their, I love watching those videos. There's this lady that she goes and she removes
Yes.
beehives from people.
Yes.
You know who I'm
Yes.
talking
Yes.
about? Oh
Yeah.
my god, I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
obsessed with
Yeah.
her. I love her so much. Oh my
She
gosh,
makes it
she's my
look
hero.
easy. She makes it look
Oh
easy.
yeah. And she's not even wearing any protective. She's just like, they love me. I love them. We're just one with the bees. And I'm like, girl, get it. Like, I could not do, I would be in like 2 suits with like a bubble boy bubble wrapped around me. I would be terrified. But
I think I don't know
um,
who tried it out. Somebody tried it out, like what she was doing, and they got like hurt pretty bad. I think it was Chris Pratt. I could be wrong. I could
oh
be
my
wrong on
gosh,
that.
that's funny.
Yeah, like you know, but yeah, it kind of
I
goes to
just
show
love the
like
thought of
she's
the
skilled.
bees with the like the queen, and the
Yeah,
fact that every one of them follows her. It's almost like she's a god, you know, like she's their god, and
yeah,
they all follow with her, and wherever she goes they go, and they're all one unit. They all buzz. The fact that they can kill wasps that try to come into their, I don't know what type of bee it is, but they the the vibrations of their humming that they can radiate from their body makes the wasp temperature inside their body rise to a specific temperature where they explode. Like they can kill
wow,
their enemies with their vibrations that they make as a whole, like as a group.
that
I
is so
thought that was
crazy.
really cool. Yeah,
That
that's
is
something that
crazy.
they just recently found out, that when wasps try to come into specific, I'm not sure what kind of bee it is, but when they try to come into their nest, that they have, over time they have adapted to how to fight against their enemy, and they learn
Mhm.
that together. It's almost like how people talk about how are the pyramids built. I've heard theories
Mm.
of, you know, they use vibrations. They used
Yes,
vibrations to move things. And I feel like when you talk about bees and you talk about other, you know, there's all kinds of crazy things. There's just things out there that, you know, there's species of bugs that we don't even know about that have been living with us all this time that people are still discovering to this day.
absolutely.
So for the fact that anyone could deny that something exists or still exists is kind of very close-minded. You know, people are like, oh, dinosaurs don't exist. Well, there's many people who, I don't want to say it's Mothman, but there's a lot of people who have seen some type of pterodactyl type bird that's been
Right.
very well documented, early 1800s, even up until now. They're usually always based around some type of like power plant or something of that nature. Um, but you know, there's people that were just like, if you don't experience it, yes, I can understand how that's hard. But there's one story about this lady who said that this bird-like creature, this large, very large bird-like creature, picked her son up, like literally swooped down, picked this kid up. I mean, he was traumatized. He gets picked up, and he's too big for this bird, and it drops him. Okay, he drops him, but they
Jesus.
kind of, there was two of them, and they were like watching, like they were like going after them like they were little mice, and they were the owl, but it was this huge like pterodactyl type creature. And come to find out, like years later, the man who interviewed the family said that it deeply affected that child for the rest of his life. He was actually I think when he had the experience, he was 8, and then when he turned, I think when the guy came back, it was like a couple years later, so maybe he was like 12, but he said that kid had a full head of gray hair. Like that's how traumatic
Oh dear
and
Lord.
how much it aged that child
Wow.
to go through that experience. Yeah, I thought that was a very interesting story. I could tell you, I find just the craziest documentaries that these people make, and I'm so glad they made them, and I'm so glad they found these people who had the courage, to tell their stories. And there's some people that even when they're telling these stories and they're recounting them, it's really hard for them to even talk about. One gentleman had an experience where he felt like it was a Sasquatch type entity, and he was home alone, and he lived out in the woods, and he said he had kids, and he said when he saw this creature and he had this experience, that the first thing that he thought of was, oh my God, I don't want to come home and my wife find me, mangled, and wonder what happened to me. And he said, I just kept thinking, this is not okay. I don't even want my children playing outside anymore. He was like, that's how bad it was. Like, he was like, I am a man who goes out hunting in the woods, and I've done it my whole life, and I've never once feared where I live. And he said, and after I had that experience, he said, my whole life changed, and how I view things, and where I let my children run around out. He's like, it was so close, and I was alone, and no one would have known what had happened to me. He said, what if that thing just decided that it wanted to attack me? He said, I would have had no way of protecting myself whatsoever. And I think that's why these whistleblowers are coming forward about the UFOs. They feel like they are literally the strongest defense we have against anything in this world. And they are defenseless. They are defenseless in this moment. And they feel like this is a public safety concern for everyone. And they want people to be aware of what's out there. And I'm for it, because I love a conspiracy, and I love good evidence. So
Yeah, I mean, I do love it too. Like, I kind of took a break from that whole conspiracy stuff for a while at one point, because I was like, okay, this is just too much, for my brain to handle. I think like flat Earth was like the breaking point for me at one point. I was like, if this is true, then like I'm like my entire life is a lie, that kind of way. Because you hear like the whole wall of ice thing in the South Pole, and
yes,
you know I'm just gonna stick to the pyramid stuff, for now. I'm like, because that's still just but no, I mean, I love that stuff, because it's like you get to explore things, and you really want to see, like, how far is this gonna go. And it's one of those things, like what you said, like, as you go in, it's called a rabbit hole for a reason, because you're never gonna get the answers. You're gonna get more questions, and it's just fun that way as well. And it also, I think, like somewhere speaks to my that adventurous side of me, that where like I want to explore things and learn about things as well. So I guess like it all points to that. But I try to take it in like healthy doses these days, rather than going all in at the same time. Because
I have
then
to take
yeah,
breaks as well. It's
yeah.
healthy to take breaks, but I feel like how I come in and out of um, wanting to be in this is just being inspired by like my own experiences or hearing other people's experiences. And the internet
Mhm.
does help me a lot with that, because it's like I'll see a video, and I'll go, oh whoa, what was that? That was interesting. I want to know about that place. And then then
Mhm.
I go down a rabbit hole of something I've never even heard of, or that someone just posted a random video on Instagram. And I love that, because I go through phases. Maybe I'm I love. Someone asked me one time, "What's your favorite conspiracy theory?" And I said all of them because
All of
I
them, yeah.
couldn't I couldn't
Yeah.
choose one,
Hmm.
and they all interest me at different times. Maybe I'm totally into Sasquatch, and I got some good Sasquatch documentaries going. But then, like just that's why I love that you wanted to talk about flat Earth, because just this week, I mean, I was upset because I watched that Rocket Man documentary about Mad Mike, and in my heart, I already knew that he had passed away from him trying to explore the flat Earth. But I'm watching this documentary, and I'm connecting with him as a human being, and he's making me laugh, and he almost reminded me of like the Tiger King of flat Earth. Like, he was just so relatable and so
Right.
just a human, and you really connected with him. And about halfway through it, as I'm sitting there at work, I remembered that he had passed away
Right.
in one of his explorations. And at the end of it, I'm sitting there and I'm at work, and I was literally crying. I wasn't like making noise, but I was crying because I could hear the music in the documentary. Obviously, I can't see it. And I go back and I rewatch them, but it just like he inspired me to just continue to keep being myself, no matter how weird I am, no
Right.
matter
Right.
how people look at me, and maybe die doing what I love, and always continuing to do that until I do, pass away, because
Absolutely.
we
Mhm.
don't have much time, and the little time we do have, I want to do as much as I can and experience it. And that's why I chose to do this today. I couldn't be more happy that I'm talking with you. I'm getting to know you. I feel like we're connecting, and I feel like this
Absolutely.
could be a good friendship to in the future. We just have a lot in common. We think similarly. Feel like sometimes you read my mind, which is kind of crazy, but we
No, I
just are.
mean
We're
that.
on a
Yeah.
level.
Yeah.
We're on a frequency together of positivity and being open minded, and that's so refreshing to meet someone
Yeah, and I
on that
mean, like,
level.
I'm really glad like we got to do this today as well, because
We've been
I like.
talking about it for a minute, and I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. I was like, maybe maybe he's going through something, and I don't want to bug him. I said, I'm just gonna let him, come to me at the right time. And
Right.
like my friend said today, everything happens for a reason.
Hmm.
We meet people for a reason. We connect with people for a
Right.
reason, and at the right time. And I was so nervous to do this. I was really nervous. I was like, oh my gosh. I told my friend Robert, I said, I listened to the other ones. Those people sound really smart. He's like, just be yourself, and everybody loves you. And, I feel like this has been a really, really cool experience. And I hope that we get to do this again, because I've truly enjoyed going down many rabbit holes with you, many anthills
Absolutely.
as well.
Yeah, and yes as well. Yeah, I mean, we're certainly going to have to do another episode for sure because yeah, there's more I want to talk about. Definitely on the political side of things as well. Something a little bit more grounded. But and also yeah,
I love that.
I'm sure you have more stories to share as well. But I think I really enjoyed this because like birds of the same feather flock together anyways, so I'm glad like we found each other and got to do this because I think like it's really important to get different perspectives outside. Like that's one thing I like to do with this podcast, especially I call it the enlightening tangent for a reason, because as much as I love to talk about like manifestation and mindset and all that stuff, which is good like on a practical day-to-day level, to kind of improve yourself and all that stuff, like which is good, like you should be doing that. I also found myself going through the rabbit hole a lot, and like when I speak with people I go on a tangent all the time, and that's how the name came about, the enlightening tangent. And
I am the same way.
yeah, so I go on a tangent all the time, and it was an idea that I had. I didn't even know, to be very honest with you, if I wanted to keep it with the brand that I have on YouTube, because that was like my coaching business. That's like, that's a whole different thing that I do. But I was like, you know what, like because this is a podcast, like I'm not just going to be talking about one stuff or another, because it all comes back to like the mindset, and how everything's all connected, and how there are realms and things that are unseen, essentially, and there's more to this world than meets the eye, as cliche as it may sound, like. and uh,
Absolutely.
and I think, like, that's why I love connecting with people from like various different disciplines and various different worlds, and like just getting their perspective, on things. And like, I'm like, okay, tell me your story, and yeah, like, each episode is enjoyable. But I'm so glad to have you, and we're certainly going to have you more times as well. Yeah, is there anything you want to say, like where can people find you if they want to see some of your stuff? Oh yeah.
Absolutely, yes. So, where we connected, which I'm so glad, like I said, our
Yeah.
Instagram community is my favorite. But I'm on there. That's where I post like all my reels. I make conspiracy theory videos, funny videos, from different documentaries that I may watch, any type of museums that I visit.
Right.
But mainly my Instagram, which is a Shae underscore photography, is my portfolio for my work too that I do, my photography, and that's my biggest therapy. Is just being a creative artist, and
Right.
that's where I'm at. I'm growing pretty quickly on there, which is really cool to see, because someone once said to me, you're beautiful, you got amazing pictures, you're a great photographer. Did that get you any followers? No. He said, but posting conspiracy theories about the government and aliens, that gets you 4,000 followers in 1 week. And I said, yep. And so that's kind of where I got dubbed this. It was just someone had made a comment on one of my videos, and he said, I'm dubbing you Conspiracy Bay. And I was like, I like that. That's perfect. You get
Okay.
nicknames
Okay. Okay.
from others, and that one was perfect. I was like, I love that. I'm putting that on my on my information on my profile.
That's perfect, because I always tell people, like, you can never go wrong by speaking your truth. If anything, if certain people don't resonate with it, like, that means they were not meant to be in your sphere anyway. So like, when you speak your truth, like, you attract your tribe,
Your tribe. Yeah.
and
See,
you,
there
you
we
just
go.
grow. Yeah, like, yeah. So you just grow from there. And yeah, like, I think I'm glad, like, you started speaking about this stuff. And regardless of how you might be perceived, or like, taking away any sort of consideration there, and just even today, like, sharing all your stories, I'm really glad that you did. And like, I'm sure a lot of people are going to enjoy this episode, and your friends and family, and my audience as well. And yeah, I'll link all of your socials in the description, so that folks can connect with you. And
But
yeah, any closing remarks of any kind, or anything you want to say before we wrap this up?
well, I just think I'm excited to share your page as well, and share your message of your inspiration that you're putting out there in the world too. So I'm excited that both of us got to have this experience. I hope everybody enjoyed listening to us both. I know both me and him go on side quests, kind of like we do when we walk on a nature trail, but
Yeah.
we seem to live that aspect in all points in our life, especially when it's rabbit hole time. So this has been an absolute pleasure. It was so good to meet you, see you in person on our video call that we had
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah. Likewise. Yeah.
Just know that you inspire me, and I know that we've just recently met, but you've inspired me to be me, and to keep being weird, and I want everyone else to continue to do that. And just I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed doing this with me,
I
and I just hope
absolutely did,
everybody else
100%.
enjoyed
Yeah,
this.
yeah. No, I absolutely did. And yeah, like, I hope by the next time we get together, you get to watch Avatar and a few other things, and I get to go and do my explorations on a few things that you recommended as well. And
Yep, we both
next
have
time,
homework,
homework
and
to do. And yeah,
it'll
so
be
by the
good.
time, it'll be good. And once again, thank you for taking the time out of your day to do this. and I really appreciate it. Like, that is not taken for granted by me. And
Yes.
yeah, so
I
thank you
appreciate
so
the
much.
same,
Yeah,
especially with our time difference. We made this
absolutely,
work, and I
absolutely.
can't wait to rejoin you again and have
Yeah,
many wonderful conversations and laughs.
yeah, absolutely. Likewise.
So that's it for the episode, guys. If it resonated with you, be sure to drop a like and a comment down below. Turn on the bell notification so that you guys will know when I upload a new video. Guys, thank you so much for watching/listening. Stay safe and happy manifesting. Peace.